The Song of the Wahbeek by Henry Pelham Holmes Bromwell. Fair fell the golden light of June, when ruled aloft the medicine moon, throughout whose bright mysterious course the Jebus plied their subtle force, at silent hours when Gush Nebu o'er all his dusky mantle threw, to mingle draughts of marvelous power with juices of each tree and flower, whereby the deadly nightshade brews its poison from the marshland dews, or fragrant mint its balm distills beneath the starlight on the hills, whereby the wahoo stays from harm the fever spirit's burning charm, or hateful nettle unawares the venom of its sting prepares, or from the calumet's sacred bowl tobacco soothes the warrior's soul. Still held the medicine moon its power at noon and midnight's magic hour, though lost the wizard's wondrous lore, which traced those mighty laws of yore, by which the planets' mingled spell upon the living spirit fell, and gave the soul unearthly play through half the circle of a day. The Josakid, who bore alone the wampum none but he might own, had passed with all his elder line upon the spirit march sublime, by Geechee Manitou's command had sought the dread hereafter land. He, tall Nawoden, trod no more upon the valley's scented floor, nor on the hills of night and storm held vigils with some spectral form, nor by the dismal forest tomb with spirits wrestled in the gloom, to win the charms none ever knew save he and Geechee Manitou. His sacred mound stood lone and fair, no voice of Sachem echoed there, nor sound of warrior's war-whoop rung, nor chorus by the hunter sung, but silent as in ancient time, when hushed were Mathro's rites sublime. No priestly throng with solemn tread wailed ghostly requiem for the dead, or chanted to the waning night the triumph of the solstice light, nor harvest song with cymbals clang o'er beauteous field and vineyards rang, nor choral stain, nor murmured prayer, nor love-winged flute notes trembled there. The changing years had brought again a stranger race to fill the plain, and time made haste to sweep away all vestige of the red man's stay. His council fires were bright no more along the fair Peoria's shore, no more the curious wigwam rose where bright Macopan's dells repose, nor rose the war-whoop on the gale the midnight watched over Aqua's vale, nor sped the prophet's pictured bark beneath the starlight shadows dark, where winding Wabash spreads to view his willowy isles and billows blue. The chief had led his shattered bands to hunting grounds of farther lands, beyond the bright Wisconsin's tide, beyond the Mississippi wide, where to the pale face all unknown his savage pride might brood alone, where wrath might sink to sullen gloom beyond the white man's cannon boom, where on some other waves as fair and free as once Ohio's were, his light pirogue should dread no more to meet the rushing Penelor, the fire canoe whose hissing breath had ushered earthquake, pest, and death. The pioneer his cot had reared where once the council lodge appeared, the lowly cabin smoke upcurled, where oft the Mohawk's war club whirled, or bold Mowequa's hunter's feet outstripped the wild buck's nimble feet, or roused the antlered elk to bound from briery vale or hazel mound. The solitary field was seen to check the endless waste of green, those realms of verdure spreading through from Bonnepas and the bright Beaucou, to where the countless lakelets rest as gems on fair Wisconsin's breast, those grassy seas whose happy isles are every blossomed grove which smiles, whose shores are purple woods that lie in broken outline on the sky, whose waves are billowy lawns that swim, continuous to the distance dim, which yet as by the seer's control, who Egypt smote, forbear to roll. The noonday poured its burning tide o'er belted stream and prairie wide, o'er grassy slope and sheltered dale, the scene of many a campfire tale, when rushed the dauntless Illinois to charge the conquering Iroquois, or Miami's warriors dread, made all Cahokia's wigwams red, or sped the fearless voyager along Vermilion's meadows fair, or first Kentucky's bullets flew against the murderous Kickapoo. Still was the gossamer's pendant chain, unruffled stood the yellowing grain, the breeze which shook its gems of morn, which slept with the echoings of the horn, and far Kaskaskia's green arcades, mid ash and linn and bellvine shades, the shimmering haze which floats at noon o'er willowy swale or still lagoon, o'er all the north spread prairie lone, its subtle mirage now had thrown, which ever mocks the straining eye with phantom wave forms hurrying by, the ghost of billows which of yore beat there on some long sunken shore. The sere lone oak of foliage spare had ceased his whispering morning prayer, the priestly elm his chant had sung, his sweeping drapery round him flung, the sycamore's organ pipes were still, and so the hickory's rondo shrill, throughout the forest chancel dim was hushed the many-languaged hymn, all save the fountain's changeless tone beside the Sackham's medicine stone. Then meeting on that bowery crest, 4 wanderers sat them down to rest. Of mien and garb diverse were they, and each had come a different way, unlike in race and speech and age, pursuits as different each engage. One clad in rudest vestments stood, a dweller of the plain and wood, one robed in black, whose solemn air told holy things were all his care, one whose calm features plainly bore the seal of philosophic lore, and one whose years were spent to trace the records of the human race. The first beneath his waving hair displayed a front serene and fair, his lustrous eye now gay, now grave, the hailing sign of genius gave. But what was his of nature's lore, or what of learning's mingled store, or what of wisdom's cryptic hoard, or treasures history's scrolls afford? Or what of art's indwelling thought, of truths in myth and saga wrought, of heavenly writ, of life's design, might only seer or bard divine? He heeded much the converse free, which passed among the learned 3, who though of different race and speech, yet learning's midnight lamp for each had shed such light through years of toil, that meeting on that stranger soil, each hailed his fellow at first view, in words his earliest boyhood knew. He stood apart, but not as one who sought such fellowship to shun, for though to muse he seemed inclined, still courteous were his words and kind, and ever much he joyed to be with men of wiser thought than he. But long seclusion wrought on him as fetters on the eagle's limb, who loose forbears at first to try his pinions on the upper sky, till circling oft in lowlier flight, he feels return his inborn might, then with the scream that speaks his pride, bounds upward to the solar tide. Swift fly the hours when crowned with ease, a toil-worn wanderer as these sits where the gelid fountain flows, beneath the odorous grape and rose, and heeds no more in blissful rest the leagues his blistered feet have pressed. But swifter, swifter time speeds on, and hours or instants come and gone, when he whose lonely path has lain through voiceless glade and torrid plain, remote from kindred, friends, and home, where but the hardy borderers roam, a pioneer in learning's corp, a seeker of unwritten lore, afar from hamlet, cot, and field, and all which art or love can yield, thus meets with those whose spirit tone hath aught congenial with his own, who seek the fruits which knowledge yields, although perchance in different fields, or search for gems of wisdom's hoard, deep locked in minds he ne'er explored, and press the search of good and true through some, to him, strange avenue, still threading nature's complex laws back toward the grand omnific cause. Hence scarcely indeed passed away the hours which brought the close of day, and still were loth to part the four, whose paths on earth should cross no more, of secrets deep and thoughts profound, of mysteries long in silence bound, of things in heaven and air and sea, that which hath been or yet shall be, of distant lands and lonely isles, of sculptured cliffs and mouldering piles, of rising states and fallen thrones, of marshalled spheres and changing zones, of theologic problems old, the wonders life and death unfold. Discourse they long, nor yet had tired, when evening sun and clouds had fired, and stretched across the sloping lawn the shadow of the tall pecan, and purpled all the unnumbered groves, where zephyr by the twilight roves, to catch the dainty spirit's words, who whisper music to the birds, his steps first heard in air's bright fields, upon the glittering aspen shields. When thus the chronicler addressed the dweller of the trackless west, "Say, why shouldest thou keep silence thus? 'Tis well that thou take part with us, and bring to swell our mingled store what thou hast gleaned of precious lore. Thine ears have heard with gladness great what we of other lands relate, the tales of old barbaric war, the marches of the sons of Thor, traditions of that wondrous zone where Niger pours from realms unknown, of Chaldic plains and Yemen sands, of old Cathay and Tartar lands, the crumbling scripts we toil to gain, neath mouldering Taj and Aztec fane, the worship of the sacred flame, and whence the Magi's wisdom came, the lines from runic sculptures rude, or chiseled cells of Kneph and Bood, the wondrous things of wave and rock, volcanoes blast and earthquakes shock, the lawines crash, the tide waves boom, the rising Nile and red Simoon. Then say, thou rover of the plains, what prize shall here reward my pains? What old and curious legends dwell within this land thou knowest so well, which ancient hunters oft recite in cabins by the shell-bark light? What old traditions of his sires live with the chieftain's council fires? What moss-grown monumental stone, what shattered piles by years o'erthrown? What buried relics of a race who left for thine their dwelling place? Yet hold, exclaimed the reverend man, in answering these, if still thou can, omit not also to disclose, if aught the least there be which shows what the lore of prophets lost elsewhere, where elders treasured unaware, what scrapes of holy writ unknown their sages mingled with their own, or if beyond this mortal strife they fix the goal of human life, what worship they, or how whose trace still lingers round their dwelling place. For much it boots me well to scan the mystery of the soul of man, and things of faith to light restore, by scribe and pandant lost of yore. Or cried the sage, perhaps for me, some form of nature here may be, Tell me what fossil treasures sleep in rocky chambers fast and deep, what buried monster's massive bone attests the changing of the zone, which curious shells embedded keep the coastline of the ancient deep, what toppling crag or dim ravine where nature's footprints may be seen, whereby to trace her devious course ere yet the North Lakes left their source. Thus each for different cause was fain some converse for the youth to gain, if haply might his words make known some mystery of the medicine stone. But he, intent on riper lore, from tale or legend yet forbore, for much he feared the close of day should call the pilgrim corp away, who, whence they came, or whither bound, why come to that secluded ground, he nothing more than this did know, they strangely as they came might go, and leave him in that lonely land, to greet no more such welcome band. And thus his comrades to engage in further speech, and most the sage, he then begun in simple tone, reclining on the sacrum stone. His three companions, all serene, sat near on mossy cushions green. Between the opening spicewood leaves, the setting sun shot golden sheaves, which on the rock's worn sculptures smote, and all its legend plainer wrote. Reformed the jagged seam and scar, the semblance of the blazing star had wrought of wrinkled lichens brown, above the cross a golden crown. The frisking squirrel stooped to hear, the hirpling rabbit peeped in fear, the chattering martin flitted close, the raven sat aloft morose. The whistling quail in triple note repeated from the vale remote, the speckled fawn with amber eye stepped softly from the thicket nigh. The breeze threw out beside them there the pennons of the maiden hair, the feathery sumac's yellow plume, the snow grape's more delicious bloom. Around them rose, and high o'er all, the hackberry's fluted pillars tall, bore up above the crimson bine the bugles of the trumpet vine, while buttressed elm and bur oak grand stretch upward all their clasping hands to form in Gothic arches rude the temple of that solitude, whose sacred font and altar wear the spring and pitchered boulder there, while pious evening gently came, as when it bore the ancient flame, with incense from the honeyed cells of blue and pearl and scarlet bells, and o'er its lichen fringes poured lustrations from her sacred hoard, till night along the dusky meads began to count her holy beads, and rosaries on the garlands flung, which round the bannered hickories clung. The Poet. High on the slopes of the north-facing uplands, looking across the bright valleys of maples, low where the rivulets bathe the wild hawthorns which welcome the hummingbirds. On where the waves on the brink of Ontario chant to the planets which dance in their crest, lonely and still in their rest. Scattered as leaves over the broad plains of the war-loving Iroquois, far as the isles of the beautiful river, lonely and still in their rest. Far as the rock of the mystical piazza, far as the willows which worship the morning, jeweled with the spray of the wild muscoquetas, lie the strange forms of the mysterious boulders, lonely and still in their places of rest. As sits the lone exile afar from his birthplace, high on the hillside that looks to his fatherland, gazing still on while the dream lights of memory mingle their tints with the hues of the eventide, far through the home-stretching vista of hills. So sits the boulder apart in his solitude, claiming no kindred rocks of the quarry, stranger and lone mid the forms of the landscape, high on the north-facing slopes of the uplands, looking across the bright valleys of maples, far through the north-stretching vista of hills. The chronicler. Long are the years of the numberless ages, ages outreaching all human perception, since the lost rock to its resting was born. The philosopher. Who shall declare it? Who shall reveal the strange tale of the boulder, that to which ear of none living hath hearkened, that which no sculpture, dim hieroglyphic or rock-stained memorial, brings from the glimmering twilight of history, that which no wizard hath called from the darkness, that which the vision of science hath foiled? The theologist. Ere the dark waters were gathered together, came they not forth at the call of omnipotence, each with its form and its resting place given, there to remain as mementos eternal, pointing the wayfarers thus through the centuries, back from his life world's magnificent garniture, back to the night of the formless and void. The philosopher. Came they not borne on the terrible iceberg, riven from crags which encircled the pole, urged o'er the deep by the might of the whirlwind that wrestled of old with the darkness, and severed the bands of the earth-girdling cloud, making way for the javelins of light? The theologist. What ocean, the ancient of floods, was that whose black billows bore up the huge fragments, enchained to their car by the pinion of frost, which still in their loneliness, dumb as the voice of the billows which bore them, tell of the ages of God? From what gorges and quarries unknown, unmeasured by aught save the eye of Jehovah, and wrought by the earthquake of terrible might, the arm of the earthquake, the lever of fire, was the boulder in violence torn. The poet. Were they brought forth by some marvelous alchemy, molded by spirits who garnish the spheres, wrought to these forms and bestowed as earth's ornaments, meet to be worn at her bridal with mourning, as the bright shells of the clusters of coral circling the neck of some maid of the islands, as the queer beads of the forest-born princess wrought in her censure with signs of the Manitou when she comes forth to the feast of the elk? The philosopher. Why should such fragments as these be her jewels, earth who has treasures of onyx and adamant, hidden far down from the sight of all living, sealed in her granite-barred vaults from of old? Earth whom the singers thy fellows have fabled, sister of ocean, whose ample dominion, spread through the fields of the fathomless azure, mocks the small empire which spans but a continent, mocks the scant jewels its treasuries hold. The poet. Whence have they come, did the children of giants, those of the legends oft told by the Sagamores? Cast them from heights of the western Sierras, cast them in sport at the chase of the Macedon, when his dread footsteps was heard on the uplands, shaking the crest of the heaven-reaching palms? Were they the weapons once hurled in their combats, when they rushed forth to some warfare whose terrors shook the high hills, and all forests and mountains chased the black hail gods afar to their caverns, smote the full moon at her rising with paleness, bade the fierce whirlwind stand breathless in fear? The chronicler. Who were such heroes, and where are their monuments? Where their proud pillars, their sepulchres awful? Those, had they been, would have piled the huge temple, castle or fortress, or pyramid massy, towering aloft over the wrecks of man's fabrics. Would not their tombs on the mountains look down? Earth rears no beings except for the charnel house, which of her races have spent not their forces in rearing some structure to speak for their ashes, outlasting their palaces, temples, and thrones. Those have been born of the dreams which the sachem, sitting alone on the moon-lighted headland, weaves of traditions which came of his fathers, came with the earth mounds which cover their bones. The poet. Weave them he may, though he heard not the stories wrought by the poets who sang of Olympus. Weave them he may for the spirit which hastens, bearing the flame from the beacon celestial, soul of the formless which the poet shall fashion. Pass not alone through the lands of old story, halting at oceans which girdle their empire, halting at periods fixed in men's cycles. Bards of all ages have wrought in creations, peopling all regions with beings of wonder. Forms of all strangeness have dwelt in their fatherlands. Figures gigantic have stalked over their birthplaces. Seen as far objects which loom through dim vapors, seen from afar as in space, so in time, thoughts which are born in the dream world of poets, those at whose utterance the spirit bows down, sweep with light grandeur through realms of the vision land, seen by the fur-belted bard of the wilderness, seen by the wearer of mitre or crown. The philosopher. What is the sum of thy fancy's creations? Secrets of nature of which thou art speaking lie not as gems by the nectar-fed streams, hang not as fruits by the sapphire-laid avenues. Poets may tread in the garden of dreams. Say, if thou holdest the key to such knowledge, where is the door to its innermost chamber? There let us enter and read the conclusion. Else will I seek for some wiser than thou. He shall go in to that sacred adytum, he shall discover its sacred arcanum. Only the voice of philosophy teaches. What are the boulders? Whence came they? And how? The poet. What? The philosopher? Hast thou not heard him? Asking the heights and the depths of their secrets, asking each handmaid of nature in passing, those which attend in her chambers of mystery, forces which wait on the birth of the orbs, those which are loosed in the cloudbolt and typhoon, chained in loose dust of the alchemist's compound, trained in the oak to awake with the seasons, harnessed to wait on the flow of the tide wave, solvents which melt down the cliffs of old granite, wrap the tall forest in vestments of flame, torture each substance through form of all being, clay to bright foliage, and lifeblood to adamant, sapphire to float neath the eyelid of beauty, seashells to garnish the grass of the plain. Forth on his errand he hies to the mountains, scales the tall crags of the Andes and Ural, climbs to the summit of Alp and Himalaya, heights that look down on the cloud fields of continents, scorning to stoop to the voice of the thunder. Forth on the ocean, haste he to realms of the Arctic aurora, haste to the islands which burn twixt the tropics, threads of wild depths of Obi and Amazon, pierces the gorges and footprints of earthquakes, down through dark clefts to the matrix of metals, treads the hot brink of the burning volcano, birthplace of terrors and storehouse of death, scans with his instruments realms of the infinite, brings the dim nebulae down to his vision, stretches his lines through the orbits of systems, far as the bands of Arcturus and Sirius, far as the circle of Mazzaroth runs, weighs the huge planets and measures the cycles, marshals the numberless hosts of the galaxy, till the bright baldric is blazing with suns. Now he returns from such chase of the rainbow, dim are his eyes with the dust of his folios, worn is his form with the toil of a lifetime, scathed by the touch of the forces he questioned. Gray are his thin locks and wrinkled his brow. What is the sum of his world-gathered wisdom? Only a scroll whereof this is the syllabus. What are the boulders? Whence came they? And how? The theologist. None hath revealed with the pen of omnipotence, traced not of old by the hands of his ministers, those who came nigh to his presence of old. Those have but told how the evenings and mornings came at his bidding with marvelous progression, came with the forming of ocean and firmament, mainland and island, host of all races, bringing in order the things we behold, touching the things whereof now we are speaking. He who brought forward the streams in their courses, plants of all living, made also in wisdom, stones of the field, as thou seest in multitudes. Wherefore and how it were vain to imagine, made them perchance when the thorn and the bramble cursed the fair earth for the sins of its dwellers, made them perchance ere the sunlight was kindled. Yet to the soul of the humble and prudent, well may their being some lesson unfold, even as good is connected with evil, linking the present with the chaos of old. The poet. Why do they stand in the light of the centuries, under the bright ray of lily-shod morn? Why do they stand ever silent and answer not, when the weird voice of the night wind is low, weaving its plaint to the desolate oak? And the boulder unanswering gleams in the moonlight, the quivering moonlight which silvers the cloud, the tall grass low rustling, the sunflower bending its disk to the east, the pearl-vested spikenard that weeps for the dawn, all mournfully answer, we are but of yesterday. Naught of the mystery may we unfold, the night wind wails on o'er the dusky savannah. The moon dips her crescent far over the dun, formless cloud of the night. The golden-winged planets move on in their circles. The stars stand afar on the galaxy dim, and reveal not the secret of old. The philosopher. Who shall pursue the unsearchable mystery? Earth has no records which man may unroll. Who shall go down to the depths of the oceans, down to the rock ribs with anchor the headlands? Who shall descend through the depths of the continents, down to the granite-laid base of the Andes, down to the king-bolt of gravity's chain, searching the rolls of unregistered periods, groping with doubt at the ports of the ages, there to unfold to the children of knowledge that which lies hid in the multiplied folios, wrapped with the cerements of sepultured systems, sealed with the signet of secrecy old? Who shall decipher the wondrous palimpsest, written and raised by the stylus of nature, writ on the marble, the flint, and the amethyst, written on tablets of schist and of porphyry, written with figures of crystal and foliage, written and raised and still written again, writ by the earthquake, the flood and volcano, raised by the earthquake, the flood, and the flame? The poet. Who shall ascend on the wings of the meteor, high as the sphere where the thunder voice rolls? Who shall go up on the comet's swift pinion, high as the pathway of Saturn's red chariot, high as the arch of the noonday's pavilion, high as the zodiac's limitless zone, there to unravel the marvelous history, when the bright Pleiades sing to the sons of Orion and Ursa songs of the ages which ushered the sun? The chronicler. What is the span which the world calls antiquity? Search through the pages which tell of the ages, scriptures most ancient, parchments of Syria, and rolls of the catacombs, scrawled with the ciphers of races unknown, fragments of Vedas and words of Confucius, hymns of the poets of Chebar and Sinai, Talmud and Iliad, Shaster and Zend. Search for the legends of heroes the ancient, songs of the bards who were born with the races, skalds of the Northland, and poets of Sheba, tales of the hunters of Hymas and Shinar, stories of Fohi and Enoch of old. Go to the land of Euphrates or Indus, muse where the hoary-browed Sphinx and the obelisk beckon the winds of the desert to come, winds whose hot fingers still cease not in girding round Karnak and Ammon their sand-woven shrouds, far as the fountains which nourish the banyan, on to the brink of the garden-born Hiddekel, on where the altars of Odin arose, far as Copan with her forest-grown sculptures, piles of strange workmanship, fragments cyclopean, and circles druidical, emblems unriddled by mortals repose. These are the things which the chronicler searches, one with these wrecks in his book of beginnings. Out of this rubbish his page of confusions gleans but the story that little he knows. The poet. These are the things whereof poets have chanted, monuments, these of the ages of man. These, saith the boulder, these like the moss tuft which came but of yesterday, know not at all of the cycles of ages. Ages I chronicled lone in my resting place ere they began. These may look back on humanity's centuries, tracing by lustres their calendared years. On my birthnight look down through the chiliads of ages, dwindling to point in the hazy antiquity, lost in the arc of eternity's sphere. He paused, and by the fountain's brink knelt mid the purple flocks to drink. The sage philosopher sat bound in meshes of some thought profound. The chronicler his open scroll had cast beside the prelate's stole. Each voice was hushed, and all was still upon the summit of the hill. The day had crossed the term of toil, yet left its blessing on the soil. The daily wages man receives in swelling fruits and bursting sheaves. Night, mother of all worlds, who bears the incense meet for holy prayers, whose viewless hands her veil benign outspreads as nature's pardon sign, till life is lulled and sleep redeems the waste of thought with blessed dreams. For all earth's wearied hosts had dressed the tabernacle of their rest. High in the east, the effulgent moon rode on the azure heaven of June. Through boundless space the ether glowed, and all the lucent air overflowed, as though some spirit fire did play, intermingle with the lunar ray. The stars abashed withdrew their light, the plain did glitter on the sight, the forest devious outline gray stretched dim and dimmer far away. And distant groves and lonely trees seemed shadows cast on dreaming seas. About the mound the lustre fell, and through the grove's deep vaults as well, implored twixt opening elm and oak, as though a hollowed radiance broke through windows of some ancient fane, where time had shattered arch and pane. Still sat the four in silence bound, as dwellers on enchanted ground, nor marked the change as more and more a dimness gathered round and o'er, till all their leafy court was laid in blackness of a cryptic shade, for dire eclipse had quenched in gloom the splendor of the orient moon, and earth without and heaven o'erhead in dim and awful glory spread. The eternal stars walked round the pole, high spread the galaxy's awful scroll. The planets in their endless march went onward down the southern arch, where afar a cliff-like cloud upraised, with vivid fires and constant blazed, responsive to the signals bright from streamers of the northern light, and o'er the moon's relinquished throne the comet's lurid pennon shone. With instant flash the meteor bright shot thwart in heaven its line of light. From dizzy heights above the plain loud rang the harsh notes of the crane. With answering sound the hideous owl provoked the wolf's long dismal howl, and from the distant cloud the sound of muffled thunder jarred the ground. Uplook the four from round the stone, a weird and wondrous brightness shone, not like the meteor's sudden blaze, nor moon, nor planet's quiet rays, not like the light of sun or lamp, or gleam with lights the hunter's camp. A flowing, rich-hued, vapory shroud, it fell about them as a cloud, as glorious as the mists that swim where sunbeams strike the cataract's rim. As dreamlike as the sunset haze in springtime on those holy days, when Imbros flowering maple trees cast golden fleeces on the breeze. And on the pictured rock was seen a form unknown of wondrous mien, He seemed not old, and yet he bore a look which told of days of yore. Not young, and still a spell of youth was on his lineaments uncouth. Unlike to man, or beast, or fowl, no more like Peri, Dive, or Ghoul, or other form which poets say is worn by satyr, imp, or fay. And round him fell so great an awe, the gazers wist not what they saw, though every eye which on him fell saw somewhat that it knew full well. The prelate grasped his saintly crook, the chronicler let fall his book. The sage forth leaned for nearer gaze, the poet kneeled in sore amaze, and silence as the rest of death suspended every voice and breath, and strained was eye and ear of each some word or signal to beseech, while each at heart a scruple bore, whether to question or adore. No sound the awful stillness broke, till first the stranger being spoke, in voice of harsh but tuneful sound, like flints beneath the cart-wheeled ground, or like when earthquake's instant shock smites quarries of the vitreous rock, and all their caverned ledges thrill with chords no tone of art can fill. The Spirit of the Wahbeek. Whence have you come? What seek ye here? And why your wonder or your fear? Hath not the rock a spirit still, though resting on this paltry hill, as when it crowned the awful steeps which clove the heavens o'er arctic deeps? Was he who every form designed more rich in matter than in mind, that he should lack that thing to give to all his works whereby to live? Doth science such conclusion draw? Is death the all-pervading law, and life the rare exception found through nature's universal bound? If life ye have not spent in vain, long since ye must have found the chain which links as well the angelic mind to man, the gifted and the blind, as him to every form whate'er throughout the universal sphere. Why even ye admit there dwells within the ocean's senseless shells some spark of soul, whate'er it be, and wherefore not the same in me? The Poet. O Spirit, be it well or ill to meet thee on this lonely hill, auspicious still must be the hour which brings to me thy hidden power. For what thou sayest is that which dwells within my spirit's deepest cells, unproved by sense or reason's art, but by the prophecy of the heart. The bending grass and waving tree have whispered of this truth to me. The clambering vine, the mountain peak, the dewdrop and the planet speak, the same which morning's glory tell, that life in all creation dwells. The Philosopher. That we have heard and still behold, have certain sages taught of old, that nature's universal plan gives souls to all as well as man. For what is nature but the soul, which forms and actuates the whole, in order fixed by constant laws, which endless variance hath its cause? An order from design must spring, and that from life, thus everything must be with that from which it came, in essence, not in form, the same. For how can we effects suppose, not in the cause from which they rose, hence mind and soul, whate'er they be, within the primal cause we see? The Theologist. In speaking thus, 'tis well to mind that order in itself is blind, and nature, not itself a cause, is but the order in the laws, which as thou sayest are from design, and that which orders is divine, which hence divinity we call, the omnific cause, the God of all. The Chronicler. O Spirit, not of problems old, which sage or theologue may hold, would I converse, but if thou art the spirit of this flinty part, long hast thou dwelt Within this land, whereof no olden records stand, thine eyes have seen in centuries old the things no monument hath told. Thine ears have heard the words of those who perished ere these forests rose. Then tell what sage of ancient race once stood in this secluded place, who drew these pictured forms of old beneath this boulder's moss and mold. What means this circle dimly traced, these rune-like forms about it placed? What story do these lines declare, whose signet is the Tau cross there? Are they some fragments of the store of history's unremembered lore, or by some hieroglyphic art designed a mystery to impart, some secret of the omnific force which gave the elements their course? Some signs of potent spell to bind the evil power which hurts mankind? Tell me who drew these figures dim, and what they signified to him. For such as these, unriddled still, on desert plain or lonely hill, the wanderer sees in ancient lands the work of long-forgotten hands, in wild Idumea's wadis drear, beside the Northland's fountains clear, in murky crypts with mold o'ergrown, along the Nile or Tigris lone, which none who see may well divine, and fain would I the skill were mine. And if thou teach me these once more, I'll seek each trackless desert shore, and fill my scroll with precious things, and from the dusk each treasures bring, that on the waste of knowledge drear shall landmarks of the past appear. The Spirit of the Wahbeek. Long have I dwelt in this land of the meadows. Ages have passed since I sat in the sunlight. Deeds have I witnessed, no scripture hath mentioned. Words have I heard of the tongues which are silent, tales which the voice of tradition hath lost. Here where the locust, the maple, the elm tree spread their broad shadows with oaks of the centuries, o'er the bright fountain and lily-set floor, long ere the moons of the white man were numbered, came the great Josakeed, he of the land of the northern great waters, called by the Sachems the master of secrets, wondrous Nawoden, whose wampum was sacred, learned in all lore of the winds and the seasons, courses of stars, and the power of all medicines, those which are locked in the crystals and metals, those which are wrought in the veins of all wood plants, those which inhabit the flowers of all colors. Here on the mound which looks over the prairie, seen from afar with its trees of great stature, crown of the wilderness jeweled with blossoms, stood he alone in the days of the hunting moon, watching the sun going down through the vapors, scattering his javelins of flame and vermilion through the dun smoke clouds which curtain the mountains, far over the plains of the Cheyenne and Sioux. Here stood Nawoden and gazed upon Gizis, gazed on the sun as the billows of fire rolled on his disk, red as glow of hot copper, gazed at the splendors which flowed from his crown. Hear me, he cried, O thou Gizis the mighty, eye of the Manitou, Lord of the heavens. Now thou art near the dark land of Gishnimu, halting before the dim lodge of thy brother. Piske the night, with his blanket of gloom, dimmed are thy plumes with the dusk of his canopy. Now thou art near to Nawoden who calls thee. Where is the brightness which leaped from thy war spears when thou wert high in the chase of thy triumph? All thy bright javelins are melting in colors, colors to blazon the tent of the west wind, colors to pour on the robes of the forest, crimson for maple and sumac and sassafras, red for the oak and the ivy and gum tree, yellow to clothe the great poplar and hickory, purple for clusters which bend the full grapevine, haws of the valley and arrow bush slender, scarlet to garnish the beads of the wahoo, gold for the grains of the ripening mondamin, all at her coming to welcome the hunting moon, season of love, song, and dance of the brave. Hear me, O Kish thou, and lend me thy secret. Teach me the art of the metas of old, masters of serpents and skilled in all cunning. Give me the wisdom of Gushnu, the meta, he who went forth with the Aztecs we conquered when our great warriors came from the springs of the mighty Saskatchewan. Give me the secrets he bore with his wampum forth with the sons of the great Montezuma. Teach me the secrets of waking the spirits, dwelling in mountains and forest and river, dwelling in rocks and the flint-hearted Wahbeek. Show me what knowledge is hid in the figures Gushnu had traced on the rock of the metas. Now to my spirit their meaning unfold. Thus shall Nawoden outrival the Sagemoors. Thus shall he learn the great thoughts of the Manitou. Thus shall he be as the metas of old. But Gizis the sun, flaming redder and redder, poured all his colors abroad on the heavens, like the great pike of the northern lake in dying, answered no word to the prayer of Nawoden, drew round his head the dark blanket of Piske, sank to his sleep in the Awiqua of night. Only the west wind, the friend of the Jossakids, came and said softly, "Be patient, Nawoden. Ask the Pukwudgies, who gather the colors, they who were known unto Gushnu the meta, they of a secret at midnight will tell." Waited the Jossakid then by the fountain, while the Pukwudgies were gathering the colors and painting the forest, painting the leaves and the nuts and the berries, crimson and scarlet and yellow and purple. Waited Nawoden till high over the treetops sailed the bright hunting moon, queen of her sisters, queen of the night, and her chimon of silver. Sleep had come down on the hunters and maidens. Still were the wigwams and silent the forest. Only the voice of the whippoorwill heard he, only the hooting of Nistak the owl. Silent he stood by the fountain at midnight, where the Pukwudgies, the friends of the metas, talked of the worship of Mathro the mighty, talked of the days when the great Montezuma ruled all the nations as far as the Iceland, told of the temples they built for his worship, when they had made him the Lord of the heavens, second to Yahoo, supreme of all spirits, told of the mighty astrologer Gushnu, he who inscribed on the Wahbeek the symbols, known but to him through the lore of the prophets, told of the things they had seen of the ancients, how they were giants whose stature was awful, greater than 3 of the race of Nawoden, those who lie under the mounds of Kohika, Sakimas mighty, whose armies were countless, princes who builded great forts by the rivers, priests who wrought wonders by fearful enchantments, those who were prophets of Mathro and Yahoo, told of the deeds of the kings of the Eastland, how the whole land was divided in kingdoms, told of the wars of the priests and magicians, servants of Rim and the dark watching Manitou, told of the sayings of Panyan the seer. Further they told of the sad Wononase, she whom the singers most ancient name Huipuel, maid of the forest who loved false Kishila, soft voiced and gentle, who dwelt with Loquiqui, told how the maiden went out by the valleys, waiting his coming among the green meadows, waiting and watching till dews of the midnight spangled the threadlet wrought clouds of the smoke vine, spangled the flower cups she wove in her ringlets, watching nor heeding the merry Kinteka. Danced neath the lindens by stripling and maiden, told how she wondered and called to Kushila. Huipuel, come, my love, Huipuel, come. How the false echo deceitfully answered, Huipuel, come, my love, bidding her forward, till she had passed from the land of her kindred, passed to the depths of the wolf-haunted wilderness, passed with the withered flowers wrought in her tresses, weary and fainting, and sank by the hillside, where the great Mathro in pity beheld her, gave her the wings of a bird of the forest, gave her a plumage of sorrowful colors, Told how she comes to each land in her seeking, comes with the spring when Loquiqui the evening leads the young moon to the tent of Gushnimu, evermore uttering her cry while the dewdrops spangle the cloudlets of film on the smoke vine, flitting unseen through the shades of the forest, sitting alone by the hillside and crying, words in that language forgotten unuttered, save in the wailing of sad Wononasi. Huipuel, come, my love, Huipuel, come. Told how great Mathro then punished the echo's deception and jealousy. So she must tarry unseen in the solitude, so she must answer each sound which is uttered. Told they how Mathro had punished Kishila, made him the night wind which wanders in darkness, making his plumage all heavy with vapors, heavy with poisons and fogs of the marshes. Poisons he bears to the breath of the sleeping, making his eyes ever dim with his weeping, dim with the tears he sheds nightly forever, tears for the maiden who wandered forlorn. Then the Pukwudgies spoke further of Nistak the owl who sits solemn and lonely, sits in his lodge in the trunk of the sycamore, far in the gloom of the forest at midnight, cursing the Jebus which wander in darkness. Nistak, who dwelt in the land of the east wind, thought himself wiser than all of the Metas, went in the forest to mock at the Jebus, told how the Jebus came round him in anger, made him a bird by the arts of their magic, gave him great eyes to behold in the darkness, gave him great plumes for his ears of grey feathers, put him in fear of all things of the sunlight, wherefore he sits in his lodge in the sycamore, sullen and still through the hours of the sunlight, wherefore he comes in the gloom of the night hours, uttering his hideous alarm in the darkness, answering the Jebus who mock at his presence, cursing the Jebus he hears in the air. These things and more did Nawoden the Jossakid hear from the Pukwudgies by means of his magic. Also the oldest and wisest came saying, Hither, Nawoden, return at the noontide. Come at the full of the medicine moon, then shalt thou learn of the secret thou searchest. Thus did great Gushnu, the wisest of Metas, he who went out to the land of the Aztecs, when all the sons of the great Montezuma went to the land of the south wind away. Then when the medicine moon stood at the fullest, came here Nawoden at noontide and waited, sat by the Wahbeek and thought of enchantments, sat by the rock and the little Pukwudgies. Gathered the subtlest juice of the milkweed, gathered the odors of sleep-bearing blossoms, shed them about him and over and lulled him, sang their Eya, Eya lullaby softly, wove o'er his eyelids soft curtains of shadows, shadows of all things which dwelt in the sleep-land. Slumbered Nawoden, and over his spirit settled the charm that was woven by Gushnu, mystical charm of the medicine moon. Then did Nawoden converse with the spirits, spirits of all things which dwell in the forest, prairies and marshes and depths of the valleys, spirits of rocks and of rivers and fountains, those which appear not except to the Metas, those which the magic of Gushnu had bound. 9 times he came at the full of the medicine moon, moon of the Metas, and 9 times he slumbered, till he had mastered the wisdom of Gushnu. Then did he read the strange figures and angles, trace all the symbols, the pictures thou seest, chiseled by Gushnu of old on the Wahbeek, marvelous secrets which may not be uttered, saving to him who hath pressed the probation, 9 times had waited, and 9 times had slumbered, wherefore their meaning I may not unfold. The Chronicler. Nay, but I pray thee unfold me the story. Whence were the people, the tribes of Nawoden? Who were the ancients who went to the Southland? When did they come, and their staying how long? The Spirit of the Wahbeek. Over the land where the red men have wandered, long ere the germs of this forest were planted, back in the years which the Sachem called Shasha, dwelt a great people whose kings were 100, wise in the arts of the field and the workshop, some by the waters which flow to the north wind, some by the ocean which lies to the east, some by the vales of the bright Alabama, some by the rolling Ohio, and others dwelling along the great Father of waters, dwelling in city and hamlet and field. Forces which lurk in the veins of the mountains, depths of the oceans, and orbs of the heavens, wrought in the breath of the winds and the vapors, dewdrops and sunbeams, their marvelous alchemy, wrought in the seasons with dire perturbation, days smote with blasting, and nights scattered mildew. Famine came wasting the strength of the land. Forth from the northland came hordes of the wilderness, tribes of the red men as locusts in multitude, uttering the war whoop and whirling the war club, warriors who smote with the red tomahika, plumed for the combat, the ravening for slaughter, as flames of the playing fire when greedy of havoc. They ramp on the north wind, or leading each other in hurrying serpent-like measureless lines. So came the swift bands, ever fiercer and stronger, smiting the village with fire and destruction, slaughtering the flocks and the herds with their keepers, wasting the harvest field, trampling the remnant of orchard and vine. All the wise men of the nations assembled, each to his forest to counsel for safety, old men and hoary, with chiefs of the armies, metas of wisdom, and famous astrologers. All who were wise in the sight of the people came to the cities most famous for knowledge. All the high priests of the great Montezuma came to the temples in solemn processions, offered the sacrifice, lighted the incense, uttered the prayers which their fathers commanded, bowing before the bright face of the image, wrought in fine gold on the east of the temple, falling in reverence before the divinity, clothed in the sunbeam above the high altar, chanting the anthems of high adoration, crying for help for the nations distressed. O'er all the land were the signals of mourning, all through the nations were dread and perplexity. Everywhere heard were the voices of wailing, crying, what means this great anger of Mathro? Wherefore the hordes of the stranger who smites us, red is the night with the fire of our homesteads. Furrowed is earth with the graves of the perished, hunger hath wasted the strength of our warriors, fear hath come down in the hearts of the princes. Who shall deliver the rest of the people, those whom the famine and slaughter have spared? Then did great Gushnu, the wisest of prophets, wiser than all the servants of Mathro, come to the fountain and rock at the full moon, bearing the signet of light with the symbols. Sacred to Yahoo, supreme of all spirits, uttering the words which the master of knowledge taught to the chosen from days of the ancients, uttering the sentence which Yahoo, on hearing, only will answer with awful revealings, else with the stroke of the instant of Wawasime, bolt of his vengeance he holds in the cloud. Hear, O thou master of life in thy dwelling, high in thy awful pavilion of secrecy, hear thou how Gushnu hath ventured to call thee, ventured to utter the words of decision, those which shall bring him the gift of thy spirit, else on his head thy swift bolt of destruction. Fastings and labors and vigils and weariness Gushnu hath borne in the stress of his people. Born in the rites of the sevenfold purgations, these have the suffering quickened his spirit. Now are the days of his purification, never henceforth can he nearer approach thee. Give now the secret no meta possesses, show him the things of the wonderful future, those which are ordered to come on his people. Give him the power which was lost by our father, when the great sin of his soul was committed, when the first bloodshed was known among mortals, power which no son of the firstborn hath asked thee. Give now the secret, or smite with thy bolt. Hast thou not seen how the priests have forgotten? Prophets forsake thee to worship thy ministers. Temples had Mathro, and now Montezuma. None of these nations doth know thee save Gushnu. Since the last master of light hath been smitten, Gushnu alone hath the words of his wisdom. Here on the rock hath he written the symbols, sacred to light for the wise of hereafter. So if thou smite, they may stand through the ages. So if one come from beyond the great waters, skilled in thy knowledge, his heart may be strengthened, seeing that here hath been one of his fellows. Give now the knowledge to rescue my people. Show me thy favor, or smite with thy bolt. The praying of Gushnu was ended. Stillness came over all creatures. The trees of the wood bowed in reverence. The fountain drew back in its channel. The air was as pitch of the coal pit. No voice of the mighty was uttered, but silence and darkness and terror wrapped all the scene for a season. The life of all beings stood still, quelled in that stillness unspeakable, till the dread vision was ended. Leaped then the fountain with gladness, danced all the winds in their circuits exulting. The trees of the wood swept their harpstrings, the rock throbbed according to the anthem. Transplendent with emerald and fire, the colors of morn and of even flowed in the flame of the sunbeam, as the glory, the billows of Chebar, poured on the soul of the Hebrew, afterwards poured on the Hebrew when the great vision he saw. The vision of Gushnu was ended. Then did great Gushnu, the wisest of prophets, come to the cities and courts of the princes, come to the temples and cry to the people, cry to the rulers and elders assembled, uttering the wisdom of Yahweh and saying, What is the counsel of words without knowledge? Where is the wisdom which dwelleth with falsehoods? What save destruction comes forth of confusion, wrought by the evil designs of the foolish? I, who have searched out the secrets of wisdom, known to the wise of our fathers through ages, came to the place where the Spirit unsearchable showed me the knowledge which dwelt with the prophets, showed me the lot of the tribes and their rulers. Visions of that which shall come did he give me. Showed me that famine shall scourge all the countries, host of the strangers shall swarm without ceasing, fierce as the white bear and cruel as panthers. Showed me the land to their hand is delivered, that it may lie from henceforth as a wilderness, dwelling of beasts and the tribes of the plains. All the fair villages wait for destruction. Temple and grove shall in ashes be sunken, flocks and their keepers devoured in the slaughter. Warrior and aged, with maidens and children, all must be gathered as grapes to the vintage. Hearthstone and altar grow cold in the solitude. Orchard and garden with brambles be sown. Also he showed me way of escape for the rest of the people. Far to the southward there spreads a great country, lying between the bright shores of two oceans. Fair are its mountains and pleasant its valleys. Fruits of rare flavor are born in its forest. Stones of great beauty and wonderful metals dwell in its mountains and sands of its rivers. Bright is its heaven and pleasant its air. There let us hasten, bear our treasures and driving our flocks. There is the land which the ruler of kingdoms gives to the remnant escaped from these nations, land which the seers and vision foretold. There will we gather our flocks in the pastures, plant again vineyards and build again cities, reap in the valleys and rear again altars, worship again as our fathers of old. Then all of the people, approving the prophet, gather their flocks and their herds and their treasure. Forth to the land of the south went their multitudes, leaving their country to be as a wilderness. Traversed alone by the wandering savage, left their high mounds to the growth of the forest, hearthstones and threshing floors, vineyards and fields. The theologist. Surely this prophet was one of the righteous, one like the patriarchs, one like the chosen of Israel of old. Would that his words had been graven on pillars, traced on the parchment as those of the Hebrew. Then might I read in their deep revelations things of the highest, long lost to his worshippers, lost with the rolls of the seers of yore. Hath not he sung in that language forgotten songs to the Lord as did Seth and Elijah, such as rolled high over the rock crest of Ararat, such as went up from the wheat field of Israel, when the lost ark was returned to its rest? Who shall recover those strains of all ages, poured from the lips of the wise and the holy, burdened with thoughts whereon angels have pondered? Had I the volume of lost hallelujahs, what were the lore of the heathen but rubbish, dross unto him of such treasure possessed? The Poet. Truly the things of thy story are wonderful. Wise shall he be who partakes of thy knowledge. Would I might gather thy thoughts unto mine, yet near to my spirit strange visions are hovering. Visions of brightness obscured as in twilight, images born of the days thou art speaking of. Thoughts of the poets who dwelt in these solitudes, when the fresh earth wore her garments of youth, ere her bright sky had grown dim, or her sunlight paled through the cycles of evil and sorrow, as the bright eye beam of beauty is darkened, dimmed by decay of the love lighted worshipped, through the dark years of affliction and wrong. Tell me of visions which flamed on thy spirits, bards of the golden hours, first of life's morning, dreams which were warm with the life touch of angels, thoughts which upsoared on the soul wings of poets, words which were born on the tune wings of song. These, if thou canst not, still teach me some story, known to the bards of tradition and legend. Tell me some ballad, the words of a singer, one who dwelt near the headwaters of sympathy, not in the cloisters of scornful seclusions, not in high places of grandeur and wantonness, holding wild revel with passions uncouth, one who, beloved by the gentle and noble, sat by the threshold with sister-like graces, sharing the honey and milk of simplicity in the sweet tents of affection and truth. The spirit of the Wahbeek. Where is the prairie of the west? Purple swale and sunny crest, scented grove and scattered woodlands, all in summer glory dressed, through the ever-growing distance stretches on. From Michigan's placid shore to the rocky summit's hoar, from the reedy Minnewakan to the snowy Sierra Madre, to the rolling Colorado, thrice 100 leagues and more, the blossom-jeweled carpet of its undulating floor stretches on and on. On a highland once as fair, now a mesa lone and bare, where the owl and serpent share in the barking cheon's lair, and the spiteful cactus blossoms in the sunny summer air, and the prowling desert coyote howls alone. Stands a ponderous rock of old, of strange and massy mold, since the primal ages rolled, with a song unsung by any, with a history unwritten, with a mystery untold and unknown. And right wondrously it stands, like the work of mighty hands, by the force of art and labor, set on high. On a huge and rugged stone, not a brother of its own, by some power titanic thrown, on the silent spot and lone, in the unrecording tumults of the years gone by. There it stands as though it were fixed immovably with care on that formless granite socle, like the giant's ponderous anvil in its place. But though the giants might in vain strive to heave it up amain, or the baffled wintry tempest seek to hurl it to the plain, every wind which bends the thistle rocks it to and fro again on its base. When the summer life is slain, and the fire hath seared the plain, and a dismal inky stain from the black sodden cinders in the still November rain covers all, and the clouds upon the sky heaped in sullen masses lie, or come slowly drifting by, ever sadder to the spirit, ever darker on the eye, and the clammy winds are sobbing through the vapors dark that settle as a pall. Then in loneliness it towers through the melancholy hours to the shifting currents rocking all the day, as the symbol of a soul which though trifles much control, center poise upon a purpose, standeth permanent and whole, though the storms of passion struggle as they may. When the light comes down anew, bringing rays of every hue to the jewels of the dew, and the music of the morning is in all the quickened air, and the winds are breathing balm, and a holiness and calm, like a hushing of a psalm, lies over all the golden distance of the landscape fair. Then superbly doth it stand, every solemn, stern, and grand, looking out upon the land over all the quiet beauty of the scene. As a soul sublimely great, which vicissitudes of fate neither vanquish nor elate, mid the pleasant things of fortune dwells serene. When the evening light has faded, and the night comes dim and dread, and the stars are overhead, and the spirits lightly trend in their undiscovered wanderings on the air, comes a wailing broken sound, like a murmur from the ground, a memorial of a sorrow which the night wind ever keepeth, for a shuddering spirit bound in despair. In a land that distant lies, under bluer, colder skies, where the glories of the north light bathe the hills in colored flame, in the years no date that knew, we were one who now are two. We were one with thousand others, still the jagged scars we show, where the yawning rifts went through, when the bolt which smote from under, at the stroke of one made many, and 1,000 leagues asunder do we lie, the sovereign fragments of the same. Yet a tale there was of yore, by a singer told before, one whose words are with the echoes of a language heard no more since the earth grew old. Tale of vengeance and despair, mighty deeds that few may dare, of a love on earth most rare, which the love-recording angels wrote in jeweled symbols fair on their leaves of gold. In that land so fair and good, in the center of a wood, by the rocking stone which stood, with its avenues majestic, opening broad and fair, did a wondrous temple stand, with its portals firm and grand, looking o'er the cultured land, and there came the priestly band, to the morning adoration, and the noonday invocation, and the twilight prayer. And a palace stood apart, wrought with curious ancient art, rich and rare in every part, and there dwelt the sovereign monarch of the realm around. Valiant captains of the guard, with the brand and buckler hard, round the despot's awful presence kept perpetual watch and ward, in a life-league bound. And across the plains away, in a land that distant lay, by a silvery billowed bay of the rolling Gitche Gumee, in a sun-bright glen, dwelt a shepherd old and wise, who had walked in simple guise, in the pleasant ways of knowledge, down the vale of years which lies to his 70. And the lamp of life with him, as a crescent burning dim, and a minister old and dim, at the close of prayer and hymn, flickered faintly to its ceasing, and his voice was low, as he called his sons to stand near him, one on either hand, and there bent at his command, kneeling low upon the sand, for the whispered benediction and the blessing of the hand he would then bestow. They began the hoary sage, hear the words of ripest age, words of wisdom's broadest page. I am tottering on the threshold of the unseen land. I have come through storm and light, beaming day and dismal night, camping oft with pleasures bright on the upland's sunny height, oft in vales with weeping sorrows, wailing children of the night as a household band. Soon I walked with silent tread from the living fields outspread to the city of the dead, to the night's mysterious kingdom with its voiceless throng. Thou, my Mandan, soon shalt go to the strife of lance and bow. Thou, my younger, wake the glow of the burning thoughts which flow with the viol's soul communings and the voice of song. I have walked with staff and crook by the hillside and the brook, dwelt in tents amid the pastures on the plain. Yet a time there was my hand bore the jewel-hilted brand, bore the scepter of command o'er the heroes who are mingled with the slain. When the battle tide shall roll, keep the honor of thy soul. Let thy strong ambition's goal be the meed of truth and valor. This shall form thy crown. For the hero's sword is made, justice hilted, and its blade is with fortitude inlaid, and its point is tipped with mercy for a foe cast down. If thy equal thou shalt smite, there's justice for the right, but to crush the weak in fight brings no honor to thy might, and thy soul shall feel all the punishment of shame when thy foe shall do the same. This shall be his retribution who has stained his steel. Trust not him of constant smile, fear thou not the boaster's wile. Spurn the messengers of guile, slow resolve and swiftly venture in thy deed. Hold a given secret dear, to thy friend be ever near, for the weapon brother ever is the armband of thy spear in thy need. If in strife of voice and lyre thou to triumph shalt spire, still the flame of truth immortal, which shall kindle all the fire of thy soul or song, as the eye unto the seer, to the singer is the ear, wherefore things of hidden wisdom unto both belong. Lay me down to final rest on the hill of lofty crest, where the sunbeam of the morning drives the shadows of the west from the shore, where the shattered pines are strown, and the dead oak waits alone, till the dust of all his glory shall be mingled with my own evermore. This the ancient singer told, this and more the shepherd old spoke with whispering broken utterance, ere his blanching lips grew cold. Also there did he give to Mandan bold, first a royal sword of old, then a lyre to him the younger, wrought with sacred gems and gold. Each a mighty charm did hold, and his hand he crossed upon them, that in blessing and abundance they might share. When in silent death he lay, bore him thence his sons away, in the morning twilight gray, laid him down to pulseless slumber, on the hill of lofty summit, by the rolling Geechee Gumee, by the silvery Billow Bay, with a prayer. Place the mistletoe above him, set the markstone o'er his clay, looking toward the east away, sleeps he there. Then went Mandan boldly forth, o'er the waste and boundless north, where the sleepless stars unsettling ever roll. O'er the mountains jagged steep, through the gorges dark and deep, through the ever-reaching forest, o'er the snowy plains which sleep, where the icy rivers creep toward the pole. For he sought a matchless prize in a wondrous land which lies far beneath the Arctic skies, only mentioned in traditions by the ancient Medas told. And his father's sword he bore, with its charmed blade of yore. On his head a plume he wore, and his ringing shield of copper flashed with jewels which before were a monarch's chosen store in a land of old. Till he reached a wintry shore, hemmed by mountains sharp and hoar, fenced with citadels of frostwork where the ice caves shone. Crystal palaces of more, that imperial splendor glittering in the sparkling air which bore all the rainbow's tints and more, all the marvelous hues which pour from the Frost King's throne. For the wondrous light there flows, which the mystic north fire throws, mingling every hue which glows in each gem and flower. O'er the jewelled sky and land, valley deep and mountain grand, forests marshalled with their legions, like a halted host which stand, with their snowy plumes high waving by their rocky piled towers. There a mighty river's tide swept with current deep and wide, wrecks of forest, crashing ice reefs on its turbid waves that ride to the northward seas. On the shaded solemn shores, boundless woodlands spread their stores. There did Mandan build his vessel, framed of stalwart trees. And the spirits of the shores brought him curious sails and oars, cords of strangest sea vine twisted, anchors forged of precious ores, by their gnome-like skill. All his comrades hand to hand on the rocky hill and strand, like the beaver's busy band, labored wandering still. Ere the moon had changed her horn, or the wondrous Arctic morn ushered in the annual noontide, to the further isles forlorn was the perfect vessel borne on the tide. Past the headlands' turrets grim, through the mist clouds dank and dim, through the tortuous straits and seaways, by the ice field's jagged rim, o'er the deep sea's glassy billows, where the frost-built mountains swim, did she glide. To a coast of dreadful height, piled with glaciered mountains white, from whose countless spires electric doth the marvelous Arctic light blaze tremendous on the sight, when the winter's dreary night sternly reigns. There a winding chasm led through the mountain barrier dread to the happy vales which spread, where a kindlier nature ordered, and a joyous life was shed o'er the plains. There the month-long noon is bright, there the swimming mellow light glows and fades through lunar cycles all the long, long day. Fenced within their granite towers from the outer storm which lowers, lie the odorous fields and bowers, where the strange revolving sunlight paints with stranger hues and flowers those which sleep not all the hours of their dewless May. Through the gorge did Mandan haste from his wintry watery waste, twixt the towering glassy bastions toward the pole. Through the happy vales that lay farther on his venturous way, yet in these he might not stay, if his hand would grasp the treasure of his soul. On where silvery rivers rolled by the hanging rock and wold, on through sloping fields of roses, plains of billowy green and gold, meads whose blossom caskets hold odorous gems of candied nectar, sealed in cells of curious mold, jewel-crowned. Hues of morning's march of fire, mingled tints of eve's attire, in the festal sunlight floated over the plains and breezy uplands, over the mountains, forest higher. Day-born winds that life inspire waked the forest's chapel music, every tree attuned its lyre, every vale its flute note echoes joined around. Thus his changing journey led, till he reached a valley dread, deep and dark and dismal valley, doleful region of the dead. Sulphurous clouds around it spread, which a noisome odor shed. There the sunlight enters never, and the stars are fierce and red, circling over it forever, and the pole star overhead never sleeps. There no living creature go, there no plant of earth may grow, there the boiling fountains leap, forth their hissing torrents throw, and the lurid earth fires glow. Lights the chasm far below, and an awful voice from under loudly booms or doleful mutters, which the suffocating thunders in their prison caverns utter from the deeps. Hither Mandan boldly sped, passing through the portals dread, not with feeble, fearful tread, for a courage more than mortal dwelt in him. Far behind him on the plain did his comrades all remain, chilled the blood within their veins, lest the spirit's hot displeasure smite their leader with his train, should the venture prove in vain in that terrible domain of the fearful rim. As he passed the outer bound, black the horrid portals frown, black beneath the oozy ground, black the calmy air about him. Black the tumbling clouds around, vomited the yawning chasms, pitchy fumes which struggled upward through countless blasts around, and the quaking ledges bore him on through horrors more profound, spreading far. Yet within that hall of doom saw he through the hideous gloom, by that strange light's subtle magic, which such horrors doth illume, though 'twere all at midnight's womb, shut from light of sun or planet, moon or star. Every voice the winds may bear, of the fire, or sea, or air, every sound of earth or river, swelled in wide confusion there, harsh and mild. Sounds of waterfalls that leap, bound of tide waves strong and deep, groan of forests, crack of icebergs, hailstones rattle, streamlets purling, soft and wild. As he stepped, the earth below, rumbling rocked with earthquake's throe, stunning thunders crashed about him at each breath. As he further trod did roar, sounds of whelming fire before, crash of avalanche bursting o'er him, jetting vapors hissing roar, noise of tumbling rocks and lava, thundered past and evermore, whizzing meteors round and o'er, horrid darts of fire did pour, blood-red flames and blue commingled, rode the sulphurous blast which bore bolts of death. Thus, mid sights and sounds of dread, toiled he on with sturdy tread, on through leagues where dangers thickened, round his feet and o'er his head, more and more, till within that circle drear did a wondrous place appear, filled with more and mightier terrors, there had human vision never pierced before. There the spirit of the earth, since the universe had birth, Rim, the son of light and darkness, reigns alone. In that central spot of all hath he reared his wonder hall, not of tower and buttress tall, pillared front or chiseled wall, all his marvelous pavilion, with its dark and dreadful glories, would a mortal's heart appall, should they on his vision fall, and within his awful curtains of the blended day and night, darkness dread and fearful light of the fierce electric light, and the midnight's blackest pall, on a rock both huge and tall, rock of lodestone huge and tall, in his throne. In his fearful reaching hands doth he hold the viewless bands of the earth and changing planets, of the stars and flying comets, which terrestrial order keep, and his scepter of command touches every sea and land, and the tidal surges leap at his breathing on the deep, and the rising earthquakes answer at his call. And the thunder voice replies mid the tumult of the skies, and the scathing lightning flies at the glancing of his eye, and the hailstorms thunder by, and the whirlwinds at his bidding hasten all. There did Mandan gaze with awe on the wondrous things he saw, things which mortal cannot utter, though he knew. Only this he might unfold, Mandan living did behold, Rim upon his throne of lodestone, and the terrible revealings smote his blood with horrid cold, though the charmed sword of old, fated talisman of safety, forth he drew. Yet the terror quickly passed, and his heart beat loud and fast, when the mighty spirit cast gracious countenance upon him, saying, "Cometh one at last, hath no mortal of the past dared as thou, thus to claim my awful aid, since the ancient charm was laid on thy wonder-working blade. None hath dared before me stand, and the promised boon demand, which I here bestow upon thee until now. Here a higher prize behold, to thy spirit fierce and bold, than the jeweled crown or scepter monarchs wear. This, the stone of power, is thine, on thy shield of war to shine, by its potency divine. Human hands or arts malign for thy hurt in vain combine. None shall stand before thy weapon when they see the mystic sign glowing there. This the ancient singer told, this and more in days of old, this and more how Mandan bold from the presence of the spirit did withdraw from that terrible domain toward the pleasant world again, to his comrades on the plain, who had watched him in pain, fearing all his venture vain, till they scarce believed him present, whom they deem among the slain, when they saw back across the pleasant land, by the streams with golden sand, many a lakelet's lilied strand, went the joyful-hearted band, journeying slow, mid the yellow, sleepless flowers, purple woods, and fruited bowers, neath the strange, revolving sunlight, where the birds sing all the hours, all the month-long morning hours, did they go. Through the pass they trod before, twixt the glassy heights which soar to the cragged wintry shore, to the North Light's frigid birthplace, on the bounding ship once more did they stand. Soon across the friendly seas did they sweep, for now a breeze through the winding gorge which issued from the pleasant land beyond, as a breathing soft and fond, bore them swiftly on with ease toward their land. On the tapering mast it blew, till to stately trees they grew, trees of rare and beauteous foliage, which the Northland forest knew, and the ropes as vines anew clambered all the branches through, and the sails as garlands flew on the air, till they reached the homeward strand, with the Arctic forest grand, and the citadels of frostwork. Scarce the prow had touched the land, ere the planks and beams did stand, changed to rock and shell and sand, as a portion of the strand, with the vines and mast trees firmly planted there. Now the homeward way they keep, where the icy rivers sweep o'er the snowy plains that sleep, through the gorges dark and deep, o'er the jagged mountains steep, till the midnight sun tips the northward mountain chain, till across the boundless plain sunset fires they greet again, and the fitful northlight signal half the march is done. Passing deserts grim and bare, blooming groves and valleys fair, through the ever-reaching forest, on through glade and fen, on by cabin, fort, and tower, farthest bound of human power, by the hamlet, field, and city, busy haunt of men, to the distant land which lay by the silvery billowed bay of the rolling Gitchigumi, to the sun-bright glen. This the ancient singer told, this and more did Mandan bold, when he went upon his journey o'er the Northland wide and cold, for the royal sword of old, which the shepherd gave to him in his life's last hour, bore in mystic figures dim, by a wizard's mighty magic, all the awful charm of Rim, so that who the blade dare bring to the spirit's fearful presence should a wondrous treasure win, known to ancient Medas only, called the Stone of Power. Ere the night her shadows brought, for his brother Mandan sought him the shepherd's name from childhood, Clola wore of happy thoughts, of the lyre and song. Through the glen and by the bay, by the hills and streams away, in the fields and tents of shepherds, sought he far and long. But his seeking was in vain, through the forest and the plain, but these tidings could he gain, that when spring was in the meadows had he flown. Why or whither none could say, who had seen him on his way. He had passed beyond the valleys, with his lyre and staff away, all alone, to a land which lay along two fair rivers broad and strong, toward the pleasant south wind lying, land of sunlight and of song, went he on. Broad the plains before him lay, mighty rivers crossed his way, Yet with joyful heart he journeyed where the forest's leafy curtains stretched continuously away. By the vales and meadows gay, tasseled all with gems of May, for his soul was filled with music, filled with visions all the day. Gentle as the twilight's ray, glorious as the leaping splendors of the dawn. Through a country wide and good, to a temple old which stood in the center of a wood, one whose avenues majestic opened broad and fair. To a mossy rock which rose, clad with twining grape and rose, and his staff he laid beside him, and his lyre sweet tones arose. In the evening light's repose, and the birds and breezes listened, and the echoes only whispered, as each low melodious close thrill the grateful air. All the fields fresh odors bore, all the trees new jewels wore, which the maiden of the rainbow from her casket's mingled store, from her scented vase did pour to the roses of the spikenards as she passed. And the purple clouds rolled higher, and the western pearl and fire with the rainbow colors mingled, over forest, field, and spire, ever changeable attire gently cast. Then a maiden strangely fair, all her charms more saintly rare, in the slanting sunbeams glowing, in the amber tinted air, stood beneath the scented curtains of the spicewood bower, heeding him and him alone by the ancient rocking stone, lingering, wandering, listening ever to the melodious which never mortal ear or soul had known till that hour. As the blissful strains did swim on the ear and through the spirit, grew her eyes with tear mist-dim, and her soul was all on him till he ceased. Rueful then to hear no more, wandering she the gardens o'er, toward the ancient curious palace, and the singer passing hastened to the temple's open door, where the mystic rites of yore called the hierophantic corp, who the sacred emblems bore, with the singers and the players and the priest. Grandly rose the spacious fane, with its massive pillars twain, and its glorious curtained chambers lit with ceaseless holy flame, and the swelling evening chorus, through the 100 cloisters rolling, floated o'er the distant plain, full and clear. There before the lofty gate, Clolowar did silent wait, of the maiden's beauty dreaming, when a priest of solemn gait, coming, roused him, saying, "Hasten, wherefore art thou now so late? 'Tis the festival tomorrow, and the chorus singers wait. Stay not here." For he thought him surely one of the chanters of the sun, those who swelled in annual chorus when the solstice rites begun, and he led Clolowar along the way, where the sacred garments lay. Soon in order he was girded, and among the chosen choir did he bear his wondrous lyre, with the ever-living garland on his head. Through the solemn chambers vast sweeps the grand procession past, aged priests with snowy mitres, and the hierophant the last do they go, bearing symbols veiled from sight of the ancient mystic rite, of the heavenly bodies bright, of the old chaotic night, of the awful birth of light, moving on with doleful requiem in the dim sepulchral light, sad and low. All the multitude around, with their faces toward the ground, bow with wailing lamentations, as the solemn hosts go round, and the instruments of sound, and the singers' voices mingle, strain of woe. And the soundings of the dirge, like the echoings of the surge, when the winds of leaping billows on the cavern headlong surge, rise and fall. and the monarch with his crown, and the maid with veil and gown, and the flamen with his ephod, and the captain of renown, and the spearman with his armor, and the tiller grim and brown, and the shepherd with his girdle, and the servant with his burden, with the beggar bowing down, worship all. Thus the solemn pageant swept, and the priests their vigils kept, till the lingering hours had crept, past the midnight's bourne. And the night's last tears were wept, and the sun to wait his triumph in his eastern chamber slept, and his shining herald step forth before the rosy threshold of the morn. Now the chorus grand must rise, as he mounts the glowing skies, and the chanters all assemble, and the multitudes their eyes to the eastern glories turning, silent stand. When as yet to all unknown, as the flamen's signal shone, Clolo wore to sound the anthem, stood before the host alone, girt with holy azure zone, with his lyre of wondrous tone in his hand. When his lyre upon his arm, and his bow which bore a charm, not the spell of any wizard, not the touch of powers that harm, only harmony's hidden working did it hold. For the sacred chords of sound hold a mystery profound, have a mystic inner concord with their harmonies enwound, have a strain of perfect numbers which no cunning can divine, which if human hand combine, brings a charm which is divine on the soul. This did Clolo wore alone, of all mortals ever known, when he sang beside the stone, when his soul in dreams had flown, and his hand unwritten wandered to and fro, and his touch the hidden numbers drew in concert from the shell, and the strings were fired with rapture from the coming of the spell, from the power which instant fell on his bow. With his form of solemn air, with his features nobly fair, and his limbs of graceful motion, and his golden glowing hair, to his symboled vestment floating, did he stand sublimely there in the throng. As the morning stars grew pale, and the night's mysterious veil slowly toward the western mountains passed from o'er the plain and vale, rose his words of wondrous fire to the gushing of the lyre, which the bow enchanted kindled, and the dumb and listening choir found no power to wake their voices in the song. The Song of Clolawar. Rise, 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 haste, O most glorious, ride in thy might, forth on thy course through the welcoming skies, haste from thy innermost chamber which lies far in the depth of the infinite night, speed to thy goal on the uppermost skies, rise, O thou mighty, O rise. Hail, 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 earth to thy presence exultantly leaps, ocean and river and mountain and dale shout with their host when thy chariot sweeps forth through the fields of the lazure-light deeps. Shout when thy strength shall in triumph prevail. Hail in thy glory, all hail. Light, 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 this is thy life-bearing gift from of old. Void were creation omnipotent night. Earth but a chaos, the universe cold. If thou from the sky, blackened vault, shouldest take flight, or the flame spring, a mortal existence withhold, light, O ineffable light. Dead, dead, dead. Earth as a corpse in the blackness would lie. Only the stars their pale glimmering shed, as lamps of the death scene eternal outspread. But spirits of hell keep the watch of the dead, and voices of night through the pall of the sky utter a wail of the dead. But flow, 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 beauty of excellence, glory of all, in heaven from its highest and earth from below, thine ample pavilion of glory shall glow, the desert of death to a paradise grow, and life and delight which thy glances recall through the jubilant universe flow. Behold, behold, behold! 'Tis the flame of his locks on the firmament borne, and the stars dare not look through the azure unrolled, on the pavement of fire and of jacinth and gold, which is spread for his march through the arch of the morn. He comes to his triumph, behold! Shout, shout, shout! Host of all nature, come forth with delight. Islands and shores, send your greetings about. Peoples and kingdoms with rapture unite. Wake the loud chorus, for vanquished is night. Sing as he rises, full girdled with might. The dome of high heaven holds the jubilee bright. For the day of triumph, beneficent light. Shout, O earth's multitudes, shout. Higher, higher, higher! Crown with thy glory the noon of the year, Master of seasons and Lord of the skies, second to Yahweh alone the supreme, who moves in thy going and shines in thy beam, whose strength doth thy glory from darkness redeem, who only is mightier and higher. As his wondrous notes did flow, swept the lyre the charmed bow, and its mighty spell did throw over all. Chained was every heart and tongue as the golden numbers rung, thrilling, whelming every spirit, every soul that hosts among, great and small. Through the courts about that spread, where the aisles through cloisters led, through a dedum dim and dread, through the chancel high o'erhead, rolled the sound, rising, spreading, swelling still, all the heaven it seemed to fill. Trees and curtains felt the thrill, and the altar flame stood still. Pillar, wall, and pavement trembled all around. And the monarch of command, and the maid with veil and wand, and the flamen with his ephod, and the captain with his brand, and the spearman with his buckler, and the tiller of the land, and the shepherd with his girdle, and the servant with his band, with the beggar sank with rapture on the ground. Yet the anthem scarce had ceased, when a hoary-headed priest cried with voice of perturbation, Who is this doth mar our feast, and defile our sacred mysteries thus so long? 'Tis a stranger of the plain, none of all the priestly train, none of all the elected singers, one with naught of consecration, who hath dared with voice profane mingle strange unholy strains in our song. And the chanters cried as well, There is evil in his shell. 'Twas a daemon, evil presence, from its sinful numbers fell. Not in mortal hand such spell e'er did lie. And the Hierophant came near, crying, Who hath brought him here? This is blasphemy we hear. He hath sung the praise of Yahweh. By our sacred laws severe, he must die. And the multitude did shout, and the cry arose all about, He hath brought the wrath of Mathro on the land. Soon the famine's curse will fall, over field and vineyard all. We shall perish great and small by his hand. And the tumult wilder grew, all the courts and temple through, and the maidens of the chorus, veiled and mantled, all withdrew from the strife. And the priests retired afar, where the guards brought Clolawar to the council of the Flamens, for his deadly crime to answer, at the pontiff's awful bar, at the judgment seat of Mathro with his life. With his lyre wondrous sound, with his azure girdle bound, with his coral garland crowned, in that ghostly court of terror, where no pity might be found, did he wait. And the hierarch in the east, to the throng of mitred priest, spoke the awful law of Mathro, and the council when he ceased, from the greatest to the least, uttered all the doleful sentence of his fate. But the maiden who wandered lone in the garden by the stone, by the ancient rocking stone, she, the fair Loiel, who listened to the lyre's enchanted tone, came with prayer to the king with tears and prayer, yet the singer's life despair, saying, Wherefore should he perish? what the evil he had done. Who of all the elected singers with this chanter of the sun may compare? If thou save him, he shall stand as a jewel of thy hand. He hath power to win all mortals to the love of thy command by his shell. If his song indeed were harm, whence the wonder-working charm which come down upon all spirits at the moving of his arm? Surely truth he sang of Yahweh wrought the spell. Then the king commandment gave to the priest his life to save, till he come before his presence in his hall. And they brought him to the throne, where he lordly stood alone, mid the captains, guards, and heralds, all unknowing and unknown. And his manly beauty shone as the fairest and the rarest of them all. Said the king with solemn brown, Answer truly to me now, what thy name, and who thy father, and what country man art thou, who thy king? Also why thou darest stand with the chanter's sacred band, what hath brought thee to the temple, with unhallowed voice and hand, the forbidden praise of Yahweh thus to sing? Then said he, I dwell away by a silvery billowed bay of the sea of many waters in a sunbright glen. In my country I am one of the chanters of the sun, and I came before the temple when the worship was begun. And the ancient priest did bid me thus to do as I have done, for I wist not praise of Yahweh was forbidden in the chorus among men. When the king thus far had heard, seemed his pity greatly stirred, and he spoke as though to utter some benign and friendly word in his cause. And the priests were filled with gloom, and stood silent in the room, for they feared the king would save him for the swift and fearful doom of the laws. But he said, I come from far, and my name is Clolowar. I am son of Malk the shepherd, once a king renowned in war, years ago. With my lyre and bow in hand do I seek a distant land, ever harmless in my journey, as I now before thee stand. And no more do I demand than the welcome of a singer with the friendly greeting hand as I go. Then the king was as amazed, and his hand and voice he raised, and he smote upon his forehead, and his eyes with anger blazed, as he cried, Let the curse of Mathro be on thy father and on thee. Thou art doomed to death already, for my deadly foe was he, one who sought to wrest my kingdom, and for this thou comest to me. I have sworn his race shall perish with his pride. Then to fearful death they led Clolowar with solemn tread, through the palace courts and gardens, toward the distant seafold dread, oft with guiltless currents red, past the rock. Then again the princess there came with weeping and with prayer, to the lordly flamens kneeling, as they pause with scornful air, yet beseeching them to spare, yet his golden head to spare from the block. There did Clolowar again on his lyre awake the strain, and the spell came o'er all spirits as before. And they stood beneath the charm, none could lift a hand to harm, and the rapture grew and kindled, swaying every heart and arm more and more. And he stood apart and played in the rock's benignant shade, and the guards and priests grew weary, and the king was sore afraid, and the long procession stayed, and he walked with hot displeasure in his hall. And the singer did not rest till the sun had sunk to rest, and the moon was in the west. Still his bow and viol pressed, and the night wind listened waiting, and the trees with jeweled crest, and the flowers with mingled vest, and the vines with chaplets dressed, drew with dewy eyes toward him, weeping all. And the loving, trusting maid, nor priest nor sire afraid, near him coming, even nearer, all the shadowy nighttime stayed, to the wondrous music listening with the flowers. As she gazed on him alone, by the vine-clad rocking stone, listening, weeping, marveling ever as enchanted strains did swim on the air and through the spirit, and her soul was on him all the hours. But the soul-controlling charm might not urge the mortal arm, and his wearied hand did tremble, though his heart was strong and calm, and the guards stood waiting round till the notes should cease to sound on the lyre. And when morning o'er the plain, golden-sandaled came again, touching all the sky and landscape with her pencil's colored flame, and the clouds were changing signals with the westward mountain spires, rose his death-song swelling strain, sweeter, fuller, loftier flowing, as his soul did something gain of the wondrous life of pain, such as withering flowers regain when the tortured stems are wreathing in the fire. Wake, song, and lyre, awake! Bound, bound my heart, though every throbbing wild another tortured string forever break. The soul of music dies with Moloch's child, soul, shell, and song awake. Ye plaining notes of woe, and joyous accents of the festal lyre, be mute before the mighty passion's glow, which sweeps my soul and whelms in awful fire the notes of joy and woe. With throes of mightier strife and wilder ardor, as my lifeblood chills, my straining spirit grasp, but not for life, not such poor triumph could my bosom thrill with this delirious strife. Above all things of earth my soul exults, while grosser vision fades, to win the light which crowns celestial birth, which fires in ecstasy these mortal shades, above all things of earth. Farewell, thou God-voiced lyre, in strange hands thy melodies will die. The love-winged notes which kindled all thy fire shall slumber hushed where Clolowar shall lie. Farewell, thou wondrous lyre. Before my soul appear, ghosts of my fathers, heroes, prophets all, ye bend to greet me to your peaceful sphere. Thou reverend sire, I come, I hear thy call, before thy form appears. To all your triumphs high, receive your stricken offspring from his woe. Who knows to live, may haste as ye to die, to spurn the joys, the pangs which earth can show, to win your triumphs high. Behind the gathering gloom, bright childhood's joys and hopes of youth retire, smiles of the living, memories of the tomb. All earth-found bliss and hopes and fame expire behind the closing gloom. All but love alone, but this shall gird and crown my soul is here, when in the realms of light and truth unknown, ecstatic life shall fill its ample sphere. Love lives in death alone. Triumph now, my song, now baffled malice, let thy javelins smite. The immortal fires, unquenched in blood, grow strong. The soul of Clolowar to bear to loftier flight, and more triumphant song. As the winged notes did soar, and the tide of passion more through his fervored soul did pour, he did seem as a form unearthly bright, such as mocks the wilder sight, half disclosed and half unreal in the uncreated light of a dream. And the cheeks of all grew pale, and the stoutest heart did fail, and the earth swam back before them as his rapture did prevail, as the thronging concords mingled on the shell, till when sunlight's silver gleam on the purple heights did stream, fell his pulseless arm beside him, as his vision caught the gleam, and the bow upon the greensward broken fell. And the multitude about on the instant gave a shout, and the guards with brandished weapons pressed upon him from about for his life. And a mighty tumult grew, and their bows the archers drew, and their bolts the spearmen threw, and the flinty winged missiles pierced his bosom through and through, and his blood was on his mantle, on his coral girdle blue, and his golden locks were trampled in the strife. But Loiel, the maiden true, with her mighty love which grew in the love light of his presence, which no terror might subdue, by him kneeled. For his glance seraphic shone with a mystery all its own, with a charm above the tone of the melody enchanted, and its light to her alone was revealed. And the crimson flowing tide from his heart her mantle dyed, as they tore him from her side in their haste. But the Flamins cried, "Forbear, it was wrong to smite him there, for the sacred laws declare he must lie where he is slain, and his sepulture profane on this sacred spot and fair be a waste." Then a grave they quickly made, where his manly form was laid, and the multitude withdrawing left him resting in the shadow of the ancient rocking boulder, sweet and calm. And the trees with bending crowns cast their morning jewels down, and the vines of odors rare shed their incense o'er him there, and the flowers bent down their fauntlets to the singing summer air with its psalm. And the spirits of the grove round him curious garlands wove, and they gave the maple fair golden tresses of his hair. To the violets weeping there tints his azure eyes did wear, and the honeysuckle golden of his crimson blood did share with the rose. And the winds did catch a tone of the lyre's expiring moan, and their gentle breathings murmur, and their tempests sob and groan, round the ancient rocking stone, which this monument forever doth repose. But Loiel in all her woe to her people might not go, for the blood of the blasphemer on her hands was seen to flow, and she stayed by the spot whereon he fell, by the broken bow and shell, where the vine grew friendly mantled o'er the flowers which watched as well, where within its silent cell he was laid. And the days went slowly round with their summer glories crowned, but her life was swiftly passing in a fatal circle bound evermore. And the autumn's golden hours came and lulled the wearied flowers, and the wintry winds came weaving dusky morning for their bowers, wrought of seared and shattered garlands which they bore. Through each dreary wintry day ebbed the maiden's life away. Only one, a captive princess from a country far away, dared to clasp her hand or stay by her there. All her courtly maiden train shunned the hand of the profane, who had loved the cursed blasphemer, and beside the worshipped slain, ever waiting, ever wailing, must the bride of grief remain in despair. Till a grand triumphal feast called each captain, lord, and priest to the curious ancient palace. North and south and west and east came they all, and among their host a guest, stranger warrior from the west, famed for deeds of wondrous prowess, one of matchless arm possessed, fair and tall. In the palace chambers grand gathered many a courtly band, lords and magnates of the land, warriors strong and bold. And the guest his honors bore nobly there on field and floor, with his heroes 20 score, men of brave and goodly presence. On his head a plume he wore, and a curious sword he bore, and his ringing shield of copper flashed with jewels which before were a monarch's chosen store in a land of old. And when amber light was thrown from the evening's golden zone, walked her past the courts and gardens toward the ancient rocking stone with its bower. For his spirit ever wrought with his memory whom he sought, him the shepherd's name from childhood Clola wore of happy thought, and the feast to him was naught in that hour. By the rock he slowly passed, and his thoughts upon it cast, when he saw the lonely maiden in the twilight shadow kneeling on the sere and withered grass. And he came, saying gently, "Who art thou? Wherefore thus so sadly bow? Tell, I pray thee, whence thou comest, and thy name." Then the princess in surprise spoke with tears and broken sighs, telling all his fearful story and her own, saying, "Here his grave is made, where the weeping violets fade, where his lifeless form was laid, with the broken bow and viol on him thrown. Oh, the shock of Mandan's breast, oh, the woe that crushing pressed to despair, oh, the fearful wrath which came, searing all his soul as flame, as with blanching lips to heaven did he cry aloud for vengeance in the smitten singer's name, kneeling o'er his mangled body, mouldering there. Grant, O Yahoo, mighty sire, but thy bolts devouring fire. Let my arm but wreak this vengeance, then my soul content expire, if thou wilt. Strike but once with Mandan's hand, till this despot, priest, and people curse with all their blood the land, to a desert dire and damned as their guilt. Then with speed as sweeps the blast, to the palace gates he passed, like a cloud whose bolts are mustering in their fettered wrath to leap on the oaks upon the steep, and his soul rejoiced before time in the vengeance of the hour. Still his father's sword he bore, with its charmed blade of yore, and his ringing shield of copper bore the stone of power. And the stern and mighty guards, with the brand and buckler hard, as he came within the portals, bade him stand. But he put their blades aside, and across the chambers wide to the monarch did he hasten, and with voice terrific cried, "Where is Clolo War, the singer, I demand?" "Dost thou come to beard me here?" cried the monarch yet in fear, for the eye of Mandan smote him as the piercing of a spear. "Who art thou?" "Son of Moloch, whose blade hath greed on the forfeit blood to feed. Thus the curse of Yahoo smite thee here and now." And he clove them to the breast, as the guards about him pressed, but no hand might stay his weapon, and he smote them down as thistles to the floor. Mingling corpses great and small, lords and priests and servants all, and his heroes at his call leaped as lions to the slaughter, and they smote through court and hall, till a span in depth about them flowed the gore. And the captains strove to smite upon Mandan left and right, but the stone of power defended, and they sank before its might, great and small. Till the chieftains sank amaze, and the spearmen cowering gazed at the sword of Rim which blazed in the fearful hand of Mandan over all. Neither fight nor fly could they, but in terror palsied lay, for they saw again the singer, and the fearful wrath of Yahoo struck them helpless in dismay to the ground. And till morning ran their gore, every stroke fell 20 score, till no more to fill the slaughter upon garden, field, or floor could be found. All the temple, gate, and spire, all the palace wrapped in fire, spreading crimson on the heavens, was the awful funeral pyre of the warrior and the priest. And throughout the spacious plain did but ruins black remain, for the hand of Mandan's vengeance smote with sword and flame around, to the kingdom's farthest bound, parish, city, cot, and hamlet, until 40 days went round ere he ceased. While the temple's flame was red, to the rocking stone he sped, for the lone and holy maiden who was waiting by the dead, but too late, for she had fled far away. Like the broken viol's tone, like the lily's odor strown on the wailing winds of winter, had her spirit passed alone from the day. This the ancient singer told, this and more, that Mandan bold laid a curse upon the kingdom which 1,000 years should hold, and with care did he lay the maiden low, with the shell and broken bow, where the smitten singer slumbered with a prayer. And the trees did mourn in woe, and the vines did wailing throw weeds of mourning on her bosom, and the winds of winter strow for a shroud their purest snow on her there. And across the plains away to his land that distant lay, by the rolling Geechee Gumi, by the silvery Billow Bay did he go, And the stone of power he gave to the Gichigumi's wave, saying, "This shall be thy dower, nothing more doth man then crave of his foe." And the rock doth stand alone, and the wintry tempests moan, and the summer's golden splendor until now. But it mourns the forest shade, and the vines have long decayed, and the somber moss and lichen have their badges whiter laid on its brow. And when evening's light hath fled, and the night is dim and dread, and the stars are overhead, and the spirits softly tread in their undiscovered wanderings on the air, comes a wailing, sobbing sound on the dewy winds around, the memorial of a sorrow which the night forever keepeth, of the maiden who is bound in despair. This the tale there was of yore, which the singer told before, he whose words are with the echoes of the language heard no more since the earth grew old. Those the deeds which few may dare, at the love on earth most rare, which the love recording angels wrote in jeweled symbols fair on their leaves of gold. This the ancient singer told, this and more in days of old, on the giant rock of old, standing lone, with its strange and massy mold. This the song unsung by any, and the mystery unwritten, and the history untold and unknown. Low sank the tones of the spirit in ceasing, still was each voice, and the light slowly waning, swam as the glow of a nebulous luster, seen in the distance of vanishing visions, flashed the red stars in the smoky horizon, through the dim ivy-bound phantom-like aspens. Still were all voices of night in the forest. Silence came wrapping the hearts of all living. Thoughts of the past and its shadow-bound secrets thronged to the souls of the listeners who waited. Moved was the sage as he silently pondered over the dark problems of man and his destiny. Mute was the chronicler reckoning of ages. Still was the hoary-browed priest, for his spirit toiled in the webwork of inward revealings, wrought with the things of the old revelations, tracing the blendings of fable and truth. Still was the poet whose soul with the singers walked hand in hand through delectable regions, realms of the soul world within and above. Far off the earth with its tumult and wailing vanished its cruelty, vengeance, and folly. Round him were spirits whose heart-throbs are symphonies, murmuring in melodies known to the blessed, words of that language whose strains are beatitudes, holiest communions of wisdom and love. First spoke the theologue, "Strange is thy story. What thou hast told is as words of a dreamer, something of wisdom commingled with folly, something of truth with the falsehoods of fancy, such as are all things of fabulous lore. Such were of old the wild stories of heroes, such were the shadowy words of the Hierophant, speaking of knowledge in language of sorcery, drawn from the utterings of Sibyl and Pythoness. Such was the stuff of the lore of the Brahmin, Sakam and Sagemore, Druid and Scald, textures of rottenness, robes of confusion, wrought of the fragments of Babel and Ammon, eked with some shreds of truth-glorious mantle, torn in her passing from Enoch to Abraham, left among brambles by David and Paul, that which was rent and divided among them, first by her servants and last her accusers, bartered in shambles for trinkets of Mammon, cast among rubbish yet sought in high places, seen by the wayside, rejected of all." The philosopher: "Why art thou silent? Fain would I hear thee speak yet of creation, speak of the things which lie sealed with its mysteries, things that were born with the manifold changes, secrets of nature, withheld from her worshippers, sought by the gleaners of knowledge in vain. Tell me, I pray thee, whence hast thou come, and what time was thy birthnight? Where hadst thou dwell ere thy bed was this rubbish? Knowest thou at all of the mountain and sea wave? What are the things of thy life on the plain?" The spirit of the Wahbeek: Have not I been, since the eons unmeasured, times which none lower than angels hath reckoned, far, far beyond the dim bourne of man's kenning, far as the uttermost arch of that causeway, sought to be reared by the wand of the geologue, tottering and broken, based on the rubbish of mingled destructions, seen by the flickering torchlight of science, spanning the chasms where years are as atoms, back from the brink of all human beginnings, toward the black waste of primordial night. Have not I slept in the depths of the oceans, oceans whose hot billows, rolling in darkness, smote the black portals of night-shrouded caverns, billows whose voice, ever hoarse on the midnight, wailed for the coming of sunbeam and star, oceans which after chimed in her welcome the glory of morning, uttering the anthem which rose on the firmament, echoed by emulous island and mountain, round earth's full circle to Deum Laudamus, chorused through ages by jubilant voices, deep unto deep with the voice of the waterspout, shore unto shore with the trump of the cloud. Have not I towered on the brink of the precipice, high where the eagle waxed faint and ascending, high where a whisper seemed heard in the stars? These, I, and more, have I heard, have I witnessed, ere I came hither to mingle with these oaks which are sprung of the moulderings of yesterday, hills which were dust in the valleys of yore, streams which were born since I sang in their requiem, requiem of continents perished before, through the birth of land and ocean, long through darkness and commotion, in the dim and doleful shadows left of chaos. In the earth-investing shadows, ever floating from the pole, counted I the nights and mornings, not by signs which hail the dawning, when Aurora's azure portals now to mortal eyes unroll, not by human vision bounded, which by fuller light confounded, wandering sees the aid of darkness, with the mighty heavens unfold, but the hidden tokens dwelling in the heart of matter, telling how the orbs of vast creation in their mazy cycles roll, how the mighty suns eternal, urged by ceaseless power supernal, turn their flaming disk in heaven, holding in their stern control all the grand and awful systems, all the ponderous orbs which roll through the circle of existence, through the unimagined distance, worlds of majesty and glory, parts of that stupendous whole, whereof nature is the body, whereof God alone the soul, moving in unending mazes from the faintest star which blazes as the needle, answering by its untaught motion, resting on the plain or mountain, rocking on the heaving ocean, ever hails the steady pole, slow the orders of progression in measured told succession, each more perfect one by one, wheeling up in grand procession from the crypts of ancient darkness to the chancel of the sun, silent as a vigil holy, quiet as the trained band workmen and the fitted ashlars chosen, came to form the mystic temple such as earth had seen but one, with no jar of harsh-toned metal till the perfect work was done, silent as a vigil holy, past the folded banners slowly, up the avenue of shadows through the periods one by one. Shadows blending, deepening, paling, like the spectral gloom prevailing in old ministers when warning, moonbeams piece the night cloud dun, ever pauseless through the shadows, waxing paler one by one. The philosopher. What the ages tell their number, held by chaos undivided, ere the measured times begun, number of the years ere angels hailed the seasons of the sun. The spirit of the Wahbeek. What the number? Couldst thou know them, should the recording angel show them to thy dim and halting vision, blazing on the eternal scroll, haste thou past the heaven's third portal with the cherubim immortal. Span the course of the seraphs, that thy mind should grasp the whole. Hast thou told the things around thee? Do the multitudes confound thee? All the grains of summer's treasures, when her harvest billows roll, Go the first their reckoning tally, blossoms of the hill and valley. Count the prairie's golden bugles, note the seashells in thy scroll. Tell the atoms of the mountains, fix and comprehend the whole. Is not that to come eternal? Would it serve thee now to hear it? What the years that yet shall roll through the eternity which stretches onward to creation's goal? Have his years elapsed been fewer, who duration's course controlled? Is he yet an infant ruler, and his works of recent mold? That a mortal eye should scan them, that a human mind should span them, that the eternal past unfold. Yet 'twas so the mandate came, bidding light on earth arise, and the darkness lost in flame vanish from the troubled skies. Fires that wing the beam of day, all the mist and cloud consume, sink the ancient shades away, and the earth is dressed in bloom. Not by fiat's instant force, finishing what ne'er began, but in order's constant course, wrought by universal plan, that with patient forces ply in the web of life sublime, as the countless shuttles fly in the restless loom of time. Every plying cause on cause, linked through being's endless range, on the warp of changeless laws, weaving woof on ceaseless change. Then the spanning heavens outshed all the azure floods serene, streams their silvery billows spread, earth her garniture of green. Seas in dismal gloom that lay mirrored back the mountain side, plains which ne'er beheld the day blazed in sunlight's living tide. Floods of glory robe the hills like the mantle of the morn, when her glowing urn distills all the hues which earth adorn. Mountains in their lordly ranks poured 1,000 halos bright o'er the crimson curtained flanks from their diadems of light. Then the stars of morning sang as the bounding orb appeared, till the heavenly echoes rang where the farthest comet veered. Then the sons of God on high, welcoming the bride of light, poured along the upper sky paeans to creative might. From the distant orbs which roll in the zodiac's boundless plain to the adamantian pole swelled the universal strain. The theologist, who the wondrous notes may tell, who the awful song record, what the strains which man may swell when the heavens do praise the Lord. The spirit of the Wahbeek, earth responsive hailed the bands, walking all her sounding choirs, echoed back the chorus grand, sweeping from the astral lyres. Thunders chimed in measured notes, forest high exulting sung, winds upon their viols smote, veils their echo bugles rung. Cataracts from their cragged thrones poured their torrents forth in song, cliff and chasms answering tones, anthems of the seas prolong. Rocks and mountains clap their hands, oceans dance with all their waves, beating on the golden sands to the organs of the caves. 'Twas the jubilee of light, of the world from night set free. Other jubilee is bright, earth had one, and one must be. The theologist, truly let mankind be dumb, when upon his holy hill he doth to his temple come. Yea, let all the earth be still. Truly in that day of light, why should man be there to see? Only angels might unite in such glorious jubilee. The poet, yes, alone in dreams of ours, we the things of heaven may share. If such vision overpowers, who the very scene might bear? The spirit of the Wahbeek, on the tide of being past, still the march of life went by, sweeping round the cycles vast, where the dateless epochs lie. All the universe of things, born of elemental strife, all the countless forms which spring in the matrices of life, all with voice of joyous tone, insects hum to thunder's roar, minstrelsies of every zone, every note which life can pour, all and each with measured tread to the planet's chime serene, thronging wonders widespread, grander swept the marvelous scene, to the goal of periods where man, the living soul, appears, toward the centuries' markstone fair, pressing with uncounted years. Here the 6 prolific days with their wondrous work is done. Hail the jubilee of praise, for the Sabbath is begun. The Philosopher. Yea, 'tis Sabbath, where is man, where the living soul is found. All the work by ordered plan, last with human life is crowned. The Spirit of the Wahbeek. Here unrolls the human chain, object of the mighty toil, endmost of the unmeasured train, winding from the wondrous coil. All the birth of life complete, all is good, the plaudit came. Earth and sea the word repeat, heaven with all its hosts the same. Round her finished orb displayed, earth her fairest vestments wore, lamb and lion fondly played, death his wanton stroke forbore. Sulphurous cloud and noisome blast sped on dragon wings away to the caverns deep and vast, where the shackled earthquakes lay. Nature's host to worship came, bringing gifts of all their store, sunbeams with the sacred flame, woods their rarest incense bore. Seas and mountains poured their spoils, treasures of the wave and mine, fields their corn and wine and oil, mingled for the feast divine. Clouds aloft their banners bright, crimson, blue, and amber bore, tinted drops and manna white, scattered on the jeweled shore. Forest all their spreading palms wrought as tabernacles fair, where the melody of psalms floated on the holy air. The Chronicler. Then as legends old declare, which the mystic leaves record, in the east of Eden fair spread the garden of the Lord. The Poet. Then from hidden fountains forth, which such streams forever pour, east and south and west and north, flowed the sacred rivers four. The Theologist. Well might earth and sea and air all the powers for praise combine, when o'er Eden's portals fair rose the tree of life divine. The Poet. Tree on earth of heavenly root, promise buds and germful bloom, healing leaves and living fruits, ripening still beyond the tomb. The Theologist. Shadowing earth's unsullied breast, wide its balmy wings it throws, where in God's own image dressed, man the monarch may repose, feasting on the rapturous scene, radiant as the morning tide, sits the new creation's queen, mid the lilies by his side. All the higher joys of sense, waiting on the happy pair, poured their ecstasy intense o'er the blessed dwellers there. All the rapture born of love, all the life whose current rolls from the gushing fount above, filled the first of human souls. The Poet. Well might sinless spirit bands hasten from the mansions bright of the house not made with hands to the new domain of light. Thronging host of heavenly mien on the cloud-born stair appear, only since at Bethel seen in the vision of the seer. The Theologist. Well might man, the Lord of all, feel the rapture seraphs know, ere dishonored by his fall, nature clothe herself in woe. The Spirit of the Wahbeek. 'Twas creation's higher birth, nature's second jubilee, other jubilee of earth, one she had and one shall be. The Philosopher. Well dost thou speak of the ceaseless progressions, ever more wondrous through numberless ages, on from the period known to no mortal, called in the language of man the beginning, on through millenniums, lost in the void which the wise have called chaos, wanting in language no more than in thought. Yet of these things have we heard from philosophy, science doth whisper of that thou hast witnessed. tells that man's life is a thing but of yesterday, tells that his knowledge, his works are as naught. Well am I come to this day I should meet thee, would thou hast spoken to sages the ancient, Buddha, Confucius, and wise Pythagoras, Moses sublime, and the great Zarathustra, others whose forms by the river of centuries tower as the pyramids loom above ruins, those which stand lone by the desert-bound Nile. The Chronicler. Well hast thou spoken. Well should thy words fill the unwritten pages, those which through ages have waited thy coming. Now may I gather the leaves of thy volume, scattered of old in the tumults of nations, lost ere the rolls of the Hebrew were traced, nations whose germs lie in the depths of the future, yet from thy lips by my hand may recover things of humanity's restless career, secrets of man and his multiplied changes, lore of his races and manifold languages, strange superstitions and multiform worships, known not to pandit or priest or magician, lost by the chronicler, hid from the seer. The Theologist. True is thy speaking, such are the words of the writer of Israel, he who unfolded the story of Eden, he who drew dimly the picture of chaos, gathering of waters and continents rising, lights which were ordered for days and for seasons, plants and all living, and man above all, bright though in darkness, bright as becometh the blessed inspiration, dark as befitting the vision of man. Well I perceive how in all things are written, holiness unto the Lord in the highest. Only he knoweth his infinite plan, only he knoweth the wisdom unsearchable, wrought in the web of his merciful plan. The Poet. Cease not thy words, for my spirit is leaping further to pass through thy wonderful story. Long was thy silence, so be thy communing. Speak that my heart may grow large with the knowledge yet to unfold from thy marvelous teachings, rich with the treasures thine ages have gathered, secrets of life and of death and of harmonies, filling the infinite orders of being. Yet by the spirits of man unawakened, yet for the touch of humanity's sympathies, waiting on all the sweet chords of the universe. Speak that the night may grow bright on my spirit. Lo, do not all to thy utterance give ear. Hushed are all beings about thee and waiting. See, the proud oak bends his crown to thy whisper. Softly the wind trips beneath the still maples. Quiet the fountain, even the aspens are quiet to hear. The Spirit of the Wahbeek. Still in my loneliness hailed I the evenings, the morns of creation, ends and beginnings. Eve the accomplishment, morn the beginning. On from the eve of the gathering of waters, morn of the day of the wide waxing continents, ancients of lands, ere the seas were their graves. On through the multiplied stages of being, ceaseless upspringing of life and its orders, struggles of sea worm and insect and reptile, turmoil of monsters, of beast and of earth, on to the lands which were chafed by new oceans, lands where the germs of the nations at birth. Saw I the bones of the Macedon perishing, saw the worn relics of dead generations, birds of strange plumage and terrible dragons, beasts which the vision of man beheld never, relics of forest and morass and wave, whelmed in the drift beds of after-whelmed rivers, sealed in the depths of unsearchable caves, on past the ages. Saw I the bison come down from the wilderness, shaking the plains with the weight of his multitudes, leaving the fields of the north to the ice blast. Saw I the terrible march of the snowstorm, yearly invading the empire of flowers, spreading still further and further his conquest. Saw I the bamboo give place to the hickory, poplar spring forth on the hills of acacia, fir tree and pine where the almond had flourished, icebergs were floated the nautilus shell. Birds of the pole come to fix their rude dwellings, On the fair shores where the halcyon had brooded, white bears were bounded the nimble gazelle, swept on the centuries, peopling the continents, leading the races, forth from the founts of the valley of Havilah, waters of Gihon and vineyards of Hiddekel, far as the ice-girdled fjords of the Northland, far as the climes of the burning Sirocco, far as the Southlands embosomed in snows, children of Cain who went out to the eastward, hunters and horsemen and dwellers in tents, tribes and their patriarchs, builders of cities and planters of vineyards, brothers of Vulcan who smote the hard anvil, craftsmen who fashioned the sickle and spear, children of Seth who were spread into multitudes, herdsmen with cattle and flocks of the pasture, pitching their tents by the hillside and waterbrook, urging through deserts their indolent trains, tillers of earth with the plowshare and pruning hook, darkening the day with the dust of their caravans, furrowing the valley and sowing the plain, some to the lands which are spread as the seafloor neath the blue waves of the boundless Pacific, floor of the stormy Atlantic's domain. The theologist. Those were the years of the long generations, years when the days of a mortal exceeded those which now measure the life of a nation, time the stern harvester, bearing no scythe but the hourglass only, counted the moments and looked through the centuries, waiting the years which should usher his harvest, ripening afar on the plains of mortality, death with his shaft gathering rust in the quiver, rust of the blood that was shed by the firstborn, folding his wings set in silence apart. The spirit of the Wahbeek. Saw I the races grown old in their fatherlands, spreading their sails to the winds of the ocean, westward and northward, roaming the plains which now spread to the Icelands, plains which were after the storehouse of ivory, on where Huang pours his turbulent billows, far as Japan with her 100 islands, on where the merciless shores of Alaska blossomed of old with the aloe and myrtle, stemming the waves of the bounding Columbia, rearing their homes in the valleys of jasmines, vales which look out on the blue Athabasca, piling their ramparts along the bright waters, those which roll deep where the Sangamon shines, folding their flocks where the slopes of Nebraska spread to the sunbeams their palm groves and amaranths, sowing their fields by the mountains and rivers, marshalling hosts with the quiver and helmet, raising the temple and planting the vine. Fair lay the leagues of the limitless ocean, under the light of the far constellations, those which look nightly on the billows Antarctic, realms of the deep where no human eye wandered, nor sail of the mariner cut the horizon, nor car of the sea god of afterborn fable. Deep rolled the billows over Llano and Pampa, deep were the treasures of Quitos and Incas, locked in the sea's hidden coffers of crystals, those which thereafter from heights of the Andes mingled their dust with the sands of the vales. The philosopher. True is thy speaking, mighty the seas whose broad currents unhindered sweep over the bulwarks which stay the high rain clouds, else why those masses of wave-molded fragments, riven from hard ledges and wrought to minuteness, polished as beads and commingled with atoms, spreading as wide as the leagues of an empire, far as the course of the river of silver, deep as the shaft of the gold-seeker's mine. The spirit of the Wahbeek. Long were the years while the multiplied races mingled and strove in the land of the ancients, wrought in all art, in all science and mystery, filling the earth with their wisdom and knowledges, arts and idolatries, craftiness, falsehood, oppression and war. Nature still cherished her turbulent children, giving no sign of the terrors impending. Calm sat the earth with her isles as before. Mountains aloft waved their evergreen coronets. lords of the lowlands which drank of their cisterns. Seas slept serene on the laps of the continents. Rivers swept on through the empires of commerce, bearing the tribute of valley and mine. Groves on the west wind shed music and odors. Gold-vested harvest fields laughed to the olive yards. Seed time and gathering came with their promise and plenty as ever. Dews shed their blessings and clouds poured out fatness. Bright in the wake of the storm smiled the cloudbow, beautiful daughter of sunbeam and raindrop, ere her bright zone was the covenant sign. The theologist, who hath sought out his dark counsels? Who shall declare the unsearchable? Who hath the key unto knowledge? Who shall go up to the highest, through the thick darkness, unto the courts of his dwelling, passing the veils and the cherubim, entering into his secret pavilion, into the holiest, unto the light, thenceforth returning to speak the ineffable, uttering the things which his wisdom hath ordered? Whose throne is the arch of the universe, whose footstool where angels adore? Lo, the earth is before him as nothing, the terrible forces thereof as a vapor. The hills thereof sink at his presence, the mountains melt down ere he cometh. The seas become dust at the glance of his eye. The earthquake and whirlwind are only the hiding of power. His messengers no one may hinder, nor strength in the day of his coming prevail, who dwelleth and ruleth on high. The philosopher. Yea, mighty in love and in wisdom, he only hath known the beginnings, he only who knoweth the endings. Alpha, who is, and Omega, the spheres of the universe, those which are clad with his glory, the suns that go forth leading host, the globes which pass after with satellites, moons in their orders unnumbered, all haste in performing his bidding, to lead out the days and the seasons, the days which are numbered for labor, the night's pious shades fill with wonder, the days of his rest who ordained them, the seasons that walk with oblations, winter who filleth the fountains, filleth the lavers perennial, spring with her odors and garlands, summer with first fruits of plenty, Sabbath-toned autumn who beareth bread and the wine of the sacrament, to bring forth the life in all substance, life in its marvelous orders, the moss on the rock in the desert, the cedars, the glory of Lebanon, insects that sport in the raindrop, the reptile which crawleth in darkness, birds of the air and all cattle, man who is formed as his maker, angels who dwell in the heights. The poet. The wind and the fire and the pestilence, these are his swift executioners. Walking at noonday and wasting in darkness, the clouds are his banners of terror, the lightnings, the glance of his javelins, the thunders, the voice of his trumpets, the earthquake, the tread of his legions, the whirlwind, the rush of his war steeds, the stars of the poles are his sentinels, the planets his handservants waiting, the meteors bearers of signals, the terrible comet with pennon of flame appears as his swift hastening messenger, ordering the forces aright in his name. The spirit of the Wahbeek. Thus did he hasten, when he came forth as the herald of judgment, herald of terrors which followed his presence. Thus his red panoply blazed on the heavens, nightly more terrible, shedding dismay on the hearts of all living. Men gazed with dread as the torch so unwonted, filling the heaven as with glare of a death fire, streaming athwart the dark rifts of the smoke clouds, flushing to crimson the wings of the night storm, mocking the sun with its baleful suffusions, the moon as with sackcloth her countenance veiled, the spears of the north fires flashed fearful in splendor. The stars waxing pale stood afar off and trembled. The winds in their circuits stood still and breathed softly. The seas held their waves and moaned low in the stillness. Beasts of the desert went forth from their dens. Bears crept for refuge to man's vacant dwellings. Serpents crawled tamely by temple and hearthstone. Forgetting their venom, eagles came down to abide in the glens. Hark! A sound of fear, of wonder, not the hailstorm, not the thunder, uttered from breath of ocean, jars upon the stagnant air, half above and half from under, mingled sound of shock and motion, booming, rolling, like to muffled storm bells tolling, when the winds some awful burden o'er the waste of billows bear, burden of the fate of mortals, which the shipwreck fiends prepared, heard from distant echoing cavern, ere the whirlwind leaves his lair, nearer, louder, deadlier falling, more and ever more appalling, rolling inward from the ocean, from the waste of wave and air, up the coast and o'er the highlands, o'er the trembling capes and islands, onward through the shuddering mountains, o'er the inland deserts bare, spreading horror everywhere. See aloft a marvelous glimmer, where the southern stars grow dimmer, brightening, spreading to Orion, thwart the heavens its awful glare, not the storm light's sullen glamour, not the north light's changeful banners, flushing all the arctic heavens, can with that fell gleam compare, an aurora australis, wrought of hottest flame volcanic, through the seething breast of ocean, bursting to the upper air, gendered by the secret forces of the teeming fires Uranic, streaming from the torch prodigious, which its flaming pinions bear. See the mighty deep is swelling, toward the northward headlands welling, rising round the land-strung bulwarks, all the quivering islands round, islands with their forests waving, signals of distress around. Longer, louder, swell the surges, higher the unseen power urges, flood on flood with stunning sound, mighty waves as leaping mountains from the rocking shores rebound. Rolls the hissing spume its volumes, till the mountain heights are drowned, till the clouds they do confound. Darkness as an ebon ocean gathers o'er the dread commotions, where the yawning gulfs are bursting, half the world of waters round. Clouds whose darkness on the vision presses with a weight of terror, clouds of hissing vapors gendered, sulphurous as the awful curtains, which enshroud hell's inmost caverns, gird the reeling orb around. Now the flames electric leaping, fill the worldwide cloud pall sweeping, blaze upon the height of heaven, blaze upon the shuddering ground, bolts of fiercest wrath unbound, from the magazines of vengeance, swiftest, direst, of the comets swarming myriads, smite the valleys, field and forest, smite the crashing mountains down, cleave the islands to their bases, hiss through ocean's farthest bound, and the unchained thunders pealing o'er the continents resound, and the whirlwinds gathering all their hidden forces, rushing at once upon their courses, from their vortices stupendous, hurling through the direful blackness, wrecks of forests, cities, temples, with their dwellers, man and beast, and bird and reptile, floods with fire and hail mingled, gush in whelming deluge down. 'Tis the revel of confusion, back returned from chaos old, 'tis destruction's horrid orgy, bringing in the retribution, by the seer's voice foretold. Woe to earth's most ancient people, woe to all the lordly races, dwellers in the chosen places, great and little, young and old. 'Tis the first great desolation, by the mighty seer foretold, when he graved the two strong pillars, which the mystic signs did hold. 'Tis the awful resurrection of the continent imprisoned, from its sepulchre of ages, from the greedy ocean's hold. 'Tis the direful ocean burial of a continent grown old, with its kingdoms, tribes, and nations, lands most ancient of the thousand realms of old. Hark The shocks behold the rushing, the divided ocean gushing, rolls in worldwide tumult backward as the heaving mountains rise. Upward from the abyss of darkness oozy realms of death and horror, towering forms as ranks of giants looming through the cleaving skies. Tides of wreathing flame and vapor on the firmament are rolled, tides of heaven-born fires commingled with the scathing blast infernal from the furnace throat of Tophet, heated to its sevenfold fury, fires for this ordained of old. Ocean's bed uplifted showing, through its depths the white heat glowing, flames whose forked tongues updarting, raven for other floods to quench them, raven to lick the vanished planets. Leap to insult the stars on high, as the earthquake's arm from under rends the granite bars asunder, with the hidden forces stupendous, which its hissing sinews hold, flame and wave in wild convulsions, struggle to the quivering skies, as the mighty waters wrestle with their enemy of old, with the power which all defies, wrestle for the high dominion, for the prize they may not hold. Clouds on clouds in thickening volumes, with the waterspouts dread columns, rank on rank rush on tumultuous, till they wrap the laboring world, eastward, westward, hastening, leaping, over seas and islands sweeping, till the circle vast completed, on the land of Cain and Enoch, all their terrors are unfurled. Rank on rank sublime till meeting, each on each in wrath is hurled, burdened with the unmeasured torrents, which shall whelm that ancient world. Hark, the victor chants his triumph, hear the notes of exultation, swelling o'er a vanquished foe. Wide they float his crimson banners, putting out the constellations, thus his strains of triumph flow. Who shall stay my awful footstep? Who may curb the arm of fire? Who shall meet my breath unsmitten? Who prevent my purpose dire? I, who master nature's courses, first and lord of all her forces, chief of every form of matter, firstborn of the sons of chaos, living still when all expire, is not this my high commission, granted by the eternal Sire? Who hath loosed the swelling ocean, when his flowing blood doth curdle, under winter's iron girdle, when his limbs are stretched in shackles, round the headland's icy spires? Who hath led his vaunted tempest, when earth's flinty ramparts tremble, as his summoned billows leaping, through 1,000 leagues assemble, when they to the clouds aspire? Who hath urged his tide wave awful, who unchained his typhoon's ire? I, who heaved the mountains hoary, I, who spread the tropics' glory, I, who scorched the trackless desert, I, who rack the huge volcano, I, who sport the heaving earthquakes, I, the spring of nature, fire. Who of all the shiny beings, sweeping through the empyrean, crowning day and night with glory, suns or moons or comets dire, sinks not to the blackened cinder, if my flaming pinions tire? I, who lend the sun his javelins, I, who clothe the earth with beauty, urge the life which springs unceasing, bidding frigid death surrender, wake the summer's changing splendor, pour the fountain from the glacier, paint the valley's bright attire, I, the season's ruler, fire. Man and beast and reptile bless me, suns and moon and stars confess me, all shall know me, when their ordered terms expire, when I bring the consummation, crowning of all desolation, when I light their funeral pyre, when I dance upon the ruins, in whose embers all expire. Is not this my high commission? Is there one shall dwell with fire? Woe to earth's most ancient people, now they feel my vengeance dire, now the newer world I rescue, from its grave of waves shall bless me. Though it comes through desolation, poured on kindred, tribe, and nation, here shall stand my glorious trophies, here shall wondering hosts admire. Hail ye plains which spread for empires, streams of might and towering mountains. Let your leaping cataracts thunder, let your lordly crest aspire. Amazon and Chimborazo, with your 1,000 mighty brothers, spread and tower ye works of fire. Hail your awful master, fire. Hail me, Lord, ye globes and seasons, suns and oceans, bow to fire. How the fell havoc wrought ruin of nations, far as the shores of the heaving Atlantic, far as the uttermost isles of the oceans, sweeping whole kingdoms from life and remembrance. How the fierce strife of the elements ended, ocean, though conquered, his kingdom divided, shouting his victory over the living, gathered his waters together in sullenness. How the dark clouds to his bosom retreated, till the glad sun, shedding life upon all things, beauty and solace and blessing recalled. How they came forth the sojourns of Ararat, hailing the cloud bow, the signal of promise, which still from the gloom of the thundercloud shining, symbols forth life o'er the waking of destruction. These are the things which Chaldean and Hebrew rescued of old from the wrecks of the ages, told in the legends of tribes of all regions, lore of the Pandit and Sakam and Skald. Why should I tell the things which are written? Man hath his chronicles, there let him search them. Why should I tell what his race hath forgotten, those who boast knowledge which came from their fathers, races whose ancients were builders of Shinar? Is not the wisdom of God in their volumes? Why come they hither to learn in the wilderness that which their sages preserved not of old? Those were not nigh me in days of antiquity, others were with me whose memory hath died, crouching with fear at the tempest which spared them, shouting for joy when its fury abated, rearing the altar and burning the sacrifice, waking the sounds of all musical things, cymbals and organs with voice of the trumpet, psaltery and flute with the viol of strings. Nations who perish, or ever the red man chased the wild elk by the mother of waves, builded their fortresses, planted their vineyards, and reaped in the valleys, worshipped in temples of marvelous fashionings, some of idolatry, some of Jehovah, the Ancient of Days, mingling with wisdom devices of folly, dark ophiolatry, fetish and sorcery, legends strung parish with flamen and shrine, wearing the lambskin with badges satanic, signets of truth with the symbols of falsity, builded their monuments, set up their sepulchres, strangers inhabit their places of graves. Oft in my solitude saw I their journeyings, oft did their patriarchs rest by my side, rising to greet with libation and incense, poured on my bosom or waved in the censer, morning's first beams on the lazulite skies. Oft when the mantle of winter was girded round the bleak hilltop and wilderness hoary, oft when the snow shroud was white on the plain, and the tall ash bore his jewels of frostwork, past the dark files of their steel-belted champions, silently burying the quiver and targe, noiselessly pressing the path of the cougar, breathing in language none living may utter, curses too deep for the ear of the morning, muttering of vengeance too black for the light. Oft when the light of the sunset was burning far over the shimmering hills of the evening land, purple savannas and valleys of shadow, oft when the dewy rose worshipped the love star, and the soft twilight fled to the islands of spices away, oft when the harvest moon poised in the azure, swung like a gem on the brow of the orient, when the low south wind was waking the odors which slept in the censers of autumn, haste the bevy of shell-cinctured maidens, spreading their locks on the breath of the night, haste the youths from the purple-clad vineyards, forth by the fountains which sang to the sycamores, forth by the silver-laked lily-wrought brim, bounding to strains of the golden-stringed dulcimers, leading the daughters of love in the dance. Oft when the light god had finished his circuit, sweeping the tropic fields and returning, when his bright chariot, flaming in triumph, high on the uttermost limit of Cancer, ushered the midsummer tide of the north, came the high pontiff with baldric and mitre, ancient and reverend, whose locks fell as snow wreaths, which bend the tall firs in the mountains of Utah, bearing the mystic device of the deity, sacred to him who was known as Apollo, Mithra, or Balder in regions afar. Priest of great mane and astrologers hoary, those who watch nightly the planets as Abram did from his summit in Ur of the Chaldees, bearing strange symbols of mystical meaning, host of all ages with music and garlands, holding the feast of his annual triumph, who struggled with darkness and winter and victor, rose from the death-like embrace of the highest to pour round a hemisphere blessing and life. High rose the sound of the echoing chorus, filling the vaults, the oaks with its thunder, music of instruments rolling above. These were around me, yet in my solitude, still I reposed till the light of their temples sank and expired, till the wild scream of the gray forest eagle rang from the heights of the ivy-clad oaks, oaks that waxed ancient. Deep in the forest that waved o'er the harvest fields, forests which shaded the place of their graves. Slowly rolled the years till the shaft of the red man crimsoned its barbs in the blood of the buffalo. Still I repose while the moons of the Sachem were counted in wampum of mystical braiding. Still I repose. Long is the tale of the tribes of the forest, those who now dwell in the land of another, wanderers and wild as their fathers, whose footsteps mark the drear plains of the Kalmuck afar. Tameless and bold through the multiplied centuries rose the fierce red man, fulfilling the destiny marked for his race when beyond the great waters, marked from the days called the ancient confusion, when bands of the lawless went out to the wilderness. Chieftains who scoffed at the labor and knowledge went with the hunters who served the bold Manitou, rearing their offspring beside the wild panthers, wandering in tribes to the end of their days. Oft rang the war whoop, and often in triumph came the proud braves of the conflict afar, bearing the trophies of merciless victories, mantles of warriors and badges of chieftains, captains for torture, treasures of wampum and weapons of war. Round the bright council fire gathered the chieftains in savage decorum, lighting the calumet, brooding over wrongs which incited to vengeance, planning new forays on camps of the foemen, chanting the deeds of their heroes departed, hunters of old who had wrestled with monsters, beasts of the caverns or dragons of marshes, braves who had smitten the foe in his ambush, or danced when his wigwam grew red on the midnight, or bore the dread torture and scorned the complaint. Gone is the chieftain who waved the red war club off to the conflict which reddened the plain. Gone is the Sachem who bore the dread symbols, symbols which were spoke as the voice of the Manitou. Cold is the altar. Vanished the flame from the sculptureless stone. Warrior and maiden, warhorse and hunter, as ashes are strown. Swift doth the red man make haste to his fathers. Soon his white brother shall reap o'er his sepulchres. But my history marvelous, whence am I come, will I never disclose. Man hath not seen when I sat with my brethren. Why should he hear my incredible tale? Soon am I lost in the green-vested prairie. Soon am I forced from my hilltop of old, doomed to be crushed by the wheel of progression. Only the white man disturbs my repose. The words of the Wahbeek are ended. The figure vanished from the stone, the wondrous light no longer shone. The night wind from its trance unbound wailed in the stilly moonlight round. The fluttering vine and rocking oak once more the sacred stillness broke. The poet sprang as one amazed. Upon the pictured stone he gazed. He turned to hail his comrades three, but by the rock alone was he. He stared bewildered on the ground, but not a trace of man was found. He gazed upon the upper air, and but the holy stars were there. And o'er the shadowy, lonely hill he heard the ghostly whippoorwill, and far across a valley dark he heard his waiting watchdog bark, and saw the glimmering taper lone, which from his mother's cabin shone. He turned his homeward way to trace, yet loth to leave the wondrous place, while marveling thoughts his mind enthralled, how such a vision could befall. Though he had heard the legends old, which a pictured rock were told, and how it wrought a spell of power on sleepers at the noontide hour, who when medicine stone was high, within the fair retreat might lie, and slumbering once no more might wake, till midnight came the charm to break, the charm which thus had bid him stay, through half the circle of a day, and through the sacred night hours dim, had wrought the vision thus for him. Yet pleased he left the fount and stone, the Wahbeek song was all his own. The End.